All right, I bet everyone was wondering what happened to me. Welcome to Midnight Metal episode number 26. It's a big night tonight. You know why it's a big night tonight? Because I have a new co-host. Officially a co-host. Is here with me tonight on Midnight Metal. How are you? Can we hear you?
Yes. Hi, Robert. How are you?
Oh, man, I'm so good to have a new co-host on this show. It's just amazing. Are you feeling metal tonight?
I feel so metal.
Are you? How metal are you? Come on.
Oh, crazy, insane, off the charts, metal to like insaneness, Robert.
Metal to insaneness. Now, you did share pictures with me earlier this week of just how metal you used to be in your younger days.
Yes, I used to be a metalhead, and I was just very, dark hair, always wearing metal stuff, going to metal concerts. It was my life. And it was a great time, Robert, a great time.
And it's still a great time because we're older, wiser, and yet we're still crazy after all these years.
Definitely. And loving every minute of it.
Okay, listen. It's going to be a little academic tonight.
Okay.
A little academic because the UFO report, it dropped. You know, the government UFO report, they've been gathering. We talked UFOs last night. And if there's anything that's metal, it is UFOs because they're usually made of alloy we don't know, we don't have here on Earth. I can't really imagine anything more metal than a UFO. Can you?
No, I can't. This is the coolest thing ever, to be able to even think about the idea of contacting aliens, seeing alien technology, finding out more about their culture, being able to ask them questions about the universe. There is nothing more metal than this.
Yeah, but you know what's unfortunate? Here we wait for this report, and like Hollywood itself, these people don't know shit. They don't know shit. This report drops. I got a little article I want to share in the New York Times today about this. I got this thing ready. I got it all teed up to go. I'm just going to read it, share it with you. Here's the article from the New York Times. U.S. has no explanation for unidentified objects and stopped short of ruling out aliens. Talk about cover your ass. I mean, if this isn't a modern-day government report, I don't know what is. This was in the New York Times. Now, let me just show you. I'll move ahead so you can see this on screen. Here's a photograph. A Pentagon report released on Friday confirmed the government still has no explanation for reports of unidentified aerial objects, or UAPs, aerial phenomenon. Julian Barnes wrote this. This was posted today. I was waiting for this, and it's like, come on, man. Washington. The government still has no explanation for nearly all the scores of unidentified aerial phenomenon reported over almost 2 decades and investigated by the Pentagon Task Force, according to a report released on Friday. A result that is likely to fuel theories of otherworldly visitations. A total of 143 reports gathered since 2004 remain unexplained. The document released by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence said, of those, 21 reports of unknown phenomena involving 18 episodes possibly demonstrate technological capabilities that are unknown to the United States. Objects moving without observable propulsion or with rapid acceleration that is believed to be beyond the capabilities of Russia, China, or other terrestrial nations. But, the report said, more rigorous analysis of these episodes is needed. Ha! You think? More rigorous examination and analysis? There's no evidence that any of the episodes involve secret American weapons programs, unknown technology from Russia or China, or extraterrestrial visitations, but the government report did not rule out those explanations. The 9-page document essentially declines to draw conclusions, announcing that the available reporting is largely inconclusive, and noting that limited and inconsistent data created a challenge in evaluating the phenomenon. The report said the number of sightings was too limited for a detailed pattern analysis. While they clustered around military training or testing grounds, the report found that could be the result of collection bias or the presence of cutting-edge sensors in those areas. Government officials outlined a plan to develop, if additional funding is available, a better program to observe and collect data on future unexplained phenomena. I mean, they can do surveillance on your entire financial profile for the last 25 years, and apparently with all of our technology, Inconclusive. We need more censors. But you know what? If your social media profile needs to get run down and your credit needs to be stolen, or if our governments or businesses are going to be held responsible or held for ransom by foreign bad actors, that can happen all the time. But apparently, if we're having our military ships buzzed by unidentified aerial phenomena, they can't tell you shit. Anyway, the failure to reach a conclusion on the unexplained episodes raised questions about how seriously the government has taken them until now, and whether it has assembled adequate scientific expertise to examine them. What is with our government? We have the best scientific minds in the world, and we have they couldn't get enough. They couldn't get the brain trust they needed. They couldn't call up some people. What's the problem here? I don't know, Rita. What do you think? Oh, pardon me. What do you think?
A little otherworldly intervention
right bet
now.
You wouldn't, ladies.
I mean, to be honest with you, they said that they don't think it's aliens, but they can't explain the origin. And we're no better off than we were, 10, 15 years ago. But honestly, I'm just glad that they're acknowledging all of these fantastic naval aviators who are up in those fantastic planes, looking around, seeing things going on, and acknowledging that they are seeing stuff, that they're reporting back stuff, in opposed to calling them crazy, or maybe they just saw something. I mean, this is the first time in a long time we're really seeing that their observations are being acknowledged, and that is very scientific, Robert.
Well, I guess you're right, but government officials on Friday were reluctant to acknowledge the potential that the phenomenon could be extraterrestrial craft, a signal of how unlikely they view that explanation. There was no affirmative evidence that the unexplained phenomenon are alien spacecraft in the report. But because the government has offered no explanation for so many of the episodes, the new report is sure to fuel the enthusiasm of those who believe they could be.
Well, they can't deny it anymore, can they? I mean, there's so many censors out there. It's like in The First Duty when Wes was like, "We didn't do anything wrong," and there was this.
By the way, you just segued right into a 5th season Next Generation episode, and if anyone wants to know why you're my co-host, you just proved it. Kudos to you.
Well, in the episode, Wes gets in trouble for doing something wrong at school. I mean, we've all been there, but this one was major. And he denied it, and his classmates denied it. And out of nowhere, there's a satellite in space. Of course there's a satellite in space. It's the future. Well, this is 2021. There are so many satellites. There are so many drones. And between that and what the aviators saw, they can't deny that this is happening.
Well, the new report laid out 5 categories of possible explanation for the phenomenon. 1, a secret technology developed by an adversarial power like Russia and China. 2, classified cutting-edge American technology. A naturally occurring phenomenon. Airborne clutter, such as errant weather balloons, and a catch-all other category. That final group could include extraterrestrial technology. But of the episodes examined by the task force, only 1 could be identified and categorized. A large deflating balloon that was classified as airborne clutter. Call me crazy, but I think our fighter pilots could tell the difference between an extraterrestrial craft and a deflating balloon. What do you think?
Absolutely. These men and women are highly trained, highly skilled officers who are flying $1 million machines. They are the ones that will probably make first contact anyway, if they haven't already done so. They don't get stuff wrong.
They don't. And then this goes on. I'll put this New York Times article in the chat. And I just, it was kind of a nothing burger. I was a little, I thought we'd learn some more because, by the way, we weren't going to learn some more because if there were extraterrestrials on Earth, you think they're going to just casually release this in a report? It would fundamentally change everything about human civilization. Oh yeah, by the way, there's an advanced extraterrestrial civilization that's buzzing our military bases and jets. No one's going to tell us that. But you know what? I thought I would bring up some things that I thought would be interesting to discuss from a philosophical standpoint with you tonight.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever heard of the zoo hypothesis?
I don't believe I have, Robert. What is the zoo hypothesis?
I'm glad you asked. The zoo hypothesis speculates on the assumed behavior and existence of technologically advanced extraterrestrial life and the reasons they refrain from contacting Earth. It is one of the many theoretical explanations for the Fermi Paradox. The hypothesis is that alien life intentionally avoids communication with Earth, and one of its main interpretations is that it does so to allow for the natural evolution and socio-cultural development, avoiding interplanetary contamination, similarly to people observing animals at the zoo. The hypothesis seeks to explain the apparent absence of extraterrestrial life despite its generally accepted plausibility, and hence the reasonable explanation of its existence. A variant on the zoo hypothesis, suggested by former MIT Haystack Observatory scientist John Allen Ball, is the laboratory hypothesis. Not the zoo hypothesis, but the laboratory hypothesis, where humanity is actually being subjected to experiments, with Earth being a giant laboratory. Aliens might, for example, choose to allow contact once the human species has passed certain technological, political, or ethical standards. They might withhold contact until humans force contact upon them, possibly by sending a spacecraft to planets they inhabit. Alternatively, a reluctance to initiate contact could reflect a sensible desire to minimize risk. An alien society with advanced remote sensing technologies may conclude that direct contact with neighbors confers added risks to oneself without an added benefit. In the related laboratory hypothesis, the zoo hypothesis is extended such that the zookeepers are subjecting humanity to experiments, a hypothesis which Ball describes as morbid and grotesque, overlooking the possibility that such experiments may be altruistic, designed to accelerate the pace of civilization, to overcome a tendency for intelligent life to destroy itself until a species is sufficiently developed to establish contact, as in the zoo hypothesis. So what do you think about that?
Well, to be honest with you, Robert, if aliens ever wanted to mess with us, all they have to do is go on social media and post a few tweets or post a few comments, and they can send everything crushing down almost like if it was a whisper. So it is possible, and I wouldn't be too shocked by it. And I certainly would not be surprised by it, because it feels almost as if we are getting messed with. There are a lot of people who are watching and, who are fans and feel like some of the things that are happening are just more than a coincidence. And you have to ask yourself this question about, why is it that people have such strong feelings of, perhaps not kindness towards one another? Who's coming up with these crazy ideas a lot of times? And, it does feel like we're in a social experiment.
I read an article tonight, I kid you not, an article that was talking about the the West Side yoga movement, people that were in self-help groups. This is right before the pandemic. People that were doing Reiki, that were yoga, that were doing all that kind of stuff, and how all of these people became very susceptible to QAnon and finding themselves sucked into conspiracy theories, and a lot of it had to do with anti-vaccinations and polluting our bodies, and people that were into this group were very susceptible to these kinds of suggestions. And like you said, I find this to be, I find it hard to not believe it was an experiment. How can we use social media? I mean, what I find really interesting is why, the question that I have is, why wouldn't you? Social media exists. We built this platform. People are willingly going on to it. The Russians and foreign bad actors have figured out a way. We are being played every single 24 hours, 7 days a week on social media. We are being experimented on, maybe not by aliens, but by foreign bad actors that are micro-targeting our... I mean, look, I remember back in the early aughts when I was living in Hancock Park, right on the edge of Hancock Park. We had a Ralph's. And the Ralph's circulars that were sent into my neighborhood, it was a fairly affluent neighborhood, they would target down to the block who was buying what. Because they knew when you get your Ralph's card and you go to the grocery store and you put your card down, they could tell exactly what you bought. They had records of and then they had your credit card information or whatever. And they could target all the way down to whatever blocks that they were looking at, going, okay, all the people from these blocks are spending this much money on really nice pieces of fish or great cuts of beef. So they were able to figure out what they're going to carry in the store. If they wanted certain high-end meats, they could place it in the... All of this was being done 20 years ago. So the idea that people aren't manipulating news feeds and all that, I mean, there's been documentaries about it, but it's... I mean, to me, it's just obvious. It's par for the course. Why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you influence our elections if you could? Of course you're going to do that. I mean, the governments have been running psyops on each other for the entire 20th century, figuring out how to do these things. And now we're carrying around the tools of manipulation in our own hands, and we purchased them for ourselves. It's not like people had to like slip them into our purses or hide them in the folds of our clothes. We're just carrying it around. We're carrying these devices around. So, hey, if extraterrestrials wanted to be running social experiments on humanity, I think they probably are, and we would never know.
Well, something is happening. I mean, we can all feel it. We all know that something's not right. We have this gut feeling that things are awry. And there's really no other good explanation for it other than some sort of outside interference. And it has to be interference by an intelligent, source. It's not something that's just, out of the blue. It's very directed. There are like family members, parents and children that aren't talking over some of these issues. And, if anything, I mean, if I were an alien and I saw this happening on Earth, I might hesitate to go ahead and, approach a landing here until Earthlings could seem to understand how to get along, no matter what the differences were.
No, I agree. And my question to you is, what do we do about it? Like, we already know. I find that our inability. I look at the partisanship over government. For instance, infrastructure. We had a condominium complex that was 40 years old collapse. There's over 100 people missing and presumed dead now. This building collapsed at 1:30 in the morning, in the middle of the night. People say, well, the building was sinking for the last couple of decades. And it happened. We saw it. We had a very graphic, horrible illustration of what happens when our infrastructure fails. And yet the current president wanted to pass an infrastructure bill that was obstructed, and the teeth was pulled out of it. I mean, still there was still a bipartisan commission that helped pass this bill, but not like, why are we fighting over infrastructure? Why wouldn't it be something that couldn't every individual, every politician in the United States agree that we have an aging infrastructure that is way behind most of the developed world, and yet we can't get it together to all agree, like, Republican or Democrat, let's fix our aging infrastructure. And yet, it becomes an issue of power and control. In the meantime, we had a graphic illustration of our entire country is one step away from collapsing in terms of our infrastructure. Bridges, dams, roadways, power grids. I mean, look what happened in Texas this year. Texas doesn't import any of its power. Its power grid is basically... Well, it's Texas only, so they couldn't get any power from the rest of the United States. So people froze to death in Texas because of partisanship. This doesn't happen in the rest of the world.
Well, what's interesting about this is how it seems like our government is very distracted right now. And these distractions are causing missteps, huge missteps. My heart goes out to all the people and family who were affected by that collapse. It's a horrifying thing to think of, but we are seeing events like this happen throughout the country. And it reminds me of, kind of like, do you remember the movie called Real Men? It's like 1987, Jim Belushi.
Oh, yeah. Wow, I haven't thought of that in a long time.
Well, I had to think about it, Robert, for a number of reasons. we're talking about why is it that we can't seem to get things to work so it benefits everyone. So, in the long run, we all have a better quality of life. And if we do get visited by aliens, they'll say, oh, these humans are great. They're fantastic. But we're not having events like this. And the reason why, it's the real men principle. In the movie Real Men, Jim Belushi and his partner are agents for the government, and they have a mission. The mission is to pretty much save the earth. What happens is aliens come, and this is, just my memory of the whole thing.
Right.
Aliens come and they pour something into the ocean. And they tell Jim Belushi and his partner that we can give you the cure to this. We can give you the cure because what we poured in there will kill everything on Earth. It's going to start with the oceans. It's going to go all the way down, like from apex predator all the way down, starting with the oceans.
As aliens do.
Yes. Or instead of us giving you the cure to this, we can give you a ray gun. And here is the dilemma. I think, our government often is in a position where they have to choose between one or the other.
Yeah.
And, it's who doesn't want a ray gun, right? Like ray guns are great.
I saw Laser Blast. I know. It would be great if I had an alien ray gun. I just blow a bunch of stuff up.
The interesting part about the film is that there actually is a fight down to the bitter end as to whether or not they're going to, Jim Belushi's going to get that cure for the ocean, or whether or not we're going to have the ray gun instead. I mean, it literally is an internal conflict. And I think that particular movie, which it's very sci-fi because it's an alien group that's giving us this choice. Here's another example. What if what's going on right now is that choice? We don't really know. I mean, that movie, when I think about it and what's at stake for all of us, it's quite profound.
I agree with you. But Rod Serling was telling these stories in 1959 in the first season of The Twilight Zone. Whether it was episodes like The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street or Black Leather Jackets, we were being experimented on in the late 50s. And I feel like, have we learned anything? Have we progressed? Now, I wanted to read just a little bit more about the zoo hypothesis and the Fermi Paradox. And that's Fermi. Now, here's what the Fermi Paradox talks about. Like, theoretically, with all the stars in our galaxy, there should be civilizations because where we come from, the building blocks of life on this planet basically come from our star. There's very few, it's like 10 different building blocks of life. Carbon, nitrogen, these kinds of chemical processes that basically, as Carl Sagan said, star stuff. We are all star stuff. It's and that's where life began, with things that are in our sun. So right. The idea that there should be other life forms in the galaxies, from a mathematical standpoint, probably a given. And there's so many, the possibilities are so enormous that the reason we haven't heard from anyone, that's part of the Fermi Paradox. So this is an interesting thing. The time between the first emergence of the first civilization within the Milky Way and all subsequent civilizations could be enormous. The Monte Carlo simulation shows the first few inter-arrival times between emergent civilizations would be similar in length to geologic epochs on Earth. Just what could a civilization do with a 10 million, 100 million, or half billion year head start? Even if this first grand civilization is long gone, their initial legacy could live on in the form of passed down tradition, or perhaps an artificial life form like an AI dedicated to such a goal without the risk of death. Beyond this, it does not even have to be the first civilization, but simply the first to spread its doctrine and control over a large volume of the galaxy. If just one civilization gained this hegemony in the distant past, it could form an unbroken chain of taboo against rapacious colonization in favor of non-interference in the civilizations that follow. The uniformity of motive concept previously mentioned would become moot in such a situation. If the oldest civilization still present in the Milky Way has, for example, a 100 million year time advantage over the next oldest civilization, then it is conceivable that they could be in the singular position of being able to control, monitor, influence, or isolate the emergence of every civilization that follows within their sphere of influence. This is analogous to what happens on Earth within our own civilization on a daily basis, in that everyone born on this planet is born into a pre-existing system of familial associations, customs, traditions, and laws that were already long established before our birth, and which we have little or no control over. Some critics of the hypothesis say that only a single dissident group in an alien civilization, or alternatively, the existence of galactic cliques instead of a unified galactic club, would be enough to break the pact of no contact. To Stephen Webb, I guess as a scientist, it seems unlikely, taking humans as reference, that such prohibition would be in effect for millions of years without a single breach. Others say that the zoo hypothesis, along with its planetarium variation, is highly speculative and more aligned with theological theories. So anyway, and it also goes on to say the zoo hypothesis is a common theme in science fiction. So anyway, I love all this heady stuff. I mean, I read a book, I think it was called The Great Silence, about this very subject and the mathematical probability of life. And what's really interesting is we, as a civilization, we've already imagined all of this. Mm-hmm. We've already talked about it. We've seen it in our popular culture all the way back to George Méliès was making movies from the Earth to the Moon, and there was creatures on the moon. We've always imagined, whether you go back to the gods of Mount Olympus or even older, we've always imagined beings beyond us that are omnipotent or all powerful, that are playing with our what did the gods of Olympus do? I mean, when Zeus was bored, he would take the form of whatever and sleep with some human woman. Be like, hey baby, what's up? Come over here. I mean, that's kind of we dreamt all this stuff up already. So is it something that's just in our collective subconscious that is manifesting itself and there isn't anybody here? Or did we dream this stuff up in the first place because ancient astronauts came to Earth and influenced life before, and that's what stuck this idea in our heads? I don't know.
You know, this is a really good question, Robert, and I have some insights about this, and they're just my personal opinions.
I thought you might.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think that you're correct, in regards to the time differences and what happens between, millions of millennia, so to speak. We already know that, losing knowledge or gaining knowledge can either rapidly increase the evolution of a particular group or decrease it. Like the fire in Alexandria is always like a famous thing they always talk about, and how we lost 1,000 years in regards to our intelligence and knowledge. But I think in addition to the time spans, so maybe we are one particular species that will exist, and a million years from now there might be another one, and we're not going to have any contact with them, but we will influence them. To me, the other factor that was not mentioned, although it might have been mentioned, but I'm not sure, is sort of an order of magnitude. And when I mean order of magnitude, I mean like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where, they were protecting a world, and the world, was like the size of, like a golf ball. Right. And, so I think if you look at it from those 2 points of view, you can see how things can be missed or looked over. And the other thing that I was going to say, that I think for me is the most likely reason why we haven't had contact yet, has to do with the briar patch.
That we know of.
Let's say overall, in a global scale, common knowledge that we know of, the reason why we haven't had contact yet, in my opinion, has to do with the briar patch. So what's the briar patch? So if you're a Star Trek fan, like the briar patch is an area of gas.
It's where the Baku and the Sona lived.
That's correct. And it's an area of unstable gas. Let's say it's an area where you have unstable gas and it's dangerous to go in this area. And, you take a risk of going into that space. So if you're a time traveler or a space traveler or whatever kind of traveler you are, you tend to avoid areas where there may be regions that it's dangerous for you to go into.
Sure.
Well, guess what? there are probably alien civilizations in there. Different types of beings can exist in different atmospheres, different types of compounds. And so if you continue to avoid those areas, you're not going to make contact that way. So as far as I'm concerned, it seems likely that there may be species inside of these sort of pockets of space, like what we're in right now. It's perfectly fine for us, but for alien species, it may be very bad, and they may not even want to come in this area. So as far as I'm concerned, occasionally when we do see evidence of some sort of extraterrestrial or some sort of alien species, they're here by accident, and they're trying to get out of here very quickly because perhaps this isn't such a hospitable environment for them after all.
Well, one of the things that always puts the zap on my mind is that, like, tonight, we walk the dogs every night. And I think to myself, okay, we're walking through people's right by their landscape yards, and you think in each one of these yards is an ecosystem of thousands of life forms, insects, microbes, ant hills that we don't even know. This planet is teeming with life that we don't even notice. It's very interesting. Like, we literally walk past this one corner. I swear to God, Elizabeth always points it out. It's the same cockroach that always scampers in front of us, like, without fail. And this thing is it's a big cockroach, and it lives clearly. Its home base is this particular corner. Now, we know that there's billions of cockroaches on this planet, and clearly this cockroach lives in this one particular area. And I just think to myself, gosh, how many, we don't even pay any attention to most of the life that exists on this planet. Like, there was a story written that there was a pack on Nextdoor, the app Nextdoor. There was a pack of 12 coyotes that came out of the mountains and were hunting and attacked a guy walking his dog. This is just a couple miles from here.
Oh.
And recently, and the other day. And I have seen over the about 6 months ago or 4 months ago, I was stalked by 3 coyotes late night walking the dogs. And it was I thought there was one coyote, and it was like right out of a movie. I'm walking down the street. Then these 2 coyotes walked out from behind a hedge right in front of me. And they were totally triangulating, and the dogs are going crazy. And I'm like, I don't want to, I was shouting at them. But it was, suddenly I found myself literally in a conflict with nature, with my dogs, in a residential neighborhood here in Pasadena.
It got primal.
Yeah, it got primal. And we're not even like, we're in a flat-out residential. I mean, yes, if you go a couple of miles up, there are the hills, mountains right behind us, where they're teeming with. I saw a picture of a bear, a black bear, walked into someone's backyard and was swimming in their pool. Here in Altadena and Pasadena, just this week. Yeah, they're bobcats. I mean, they're all over the place, and they're out there. They lead their lives. Bobcats and coyotes got to eat and drink, and when they need to come down, they will. Like, and maybe animal control will find them. Maybe they won't. And you're thinking to yourself, like, imagine if the universe was full of this kind of life. And, we're in the western spiral arm of the galaxy, or as the Hitchhiker's Guide said, in a unregarded part of the, what is it? The I forget what it is. The uncharted or unregarded of the spiral arm of the galaxy. We're not even in the middle of the galaxy. We're off in the corner. Right. Where nobody cares. And what if the galaxy is teeming with life, and it's like our neighborhoods? They're walking on by, not paying us any attention, but there is an entirely rich galaxy of all kinds of intelligent beings out there that just, what do we need to talk to there's nothing on Earth for us. We don't need to talk to these people. Look what they're doing to their own planet. Who cares? Let them extinguish themselves like every other intelligent species that doesn't quite make it and doesn't realize what they're going to do. So in our own neighborhoods, we're not even aware of 99% of all of the life that is around us. So why do we expect that aliens would care? Because, look, human beings think they're the center of their own universe. And until they hear otherwise, I mean, I think half of us still wish the universe revolved around us instead of us revolving around the sun. So, I mean, I don't know. Could be. Maybe aliens want to stop by and hear some music, like go to a rock concert or something. I don't know. That might be interesting. Because why would if you were an alien, would you come to Earth? Would there be anything that Earth would have for you if you had great technology?
Absolutely. I'd want to come to Earth and meet the people here. They're talkative, for the most part, they're not overly violent. You could really have an intimate experience that perhaps you wouldn't have elsewhere, Robert.
Oh, really?
Yes.
We're back to this, our favorite subject. BB Newirth in the episode First Contact. I've always wanted to sleep with an alien. And of course, Riker obliges her. Why not? Why not? I would sleep. We've talked about this before. I would totally make it with an alien if that was, it'd be interesting to see how that worked. Or would it work? I mean, it'd be bizarre. It would be a strange thing because I think a lot of aliens wouldn't approach things like the way we do. It'd be very interesting to see. I want to meet alien civilizations. I would want to know, do they have messiah myths? Like, do they have the equivalent of Jesus in their culture? Do they have religion? Because anybody who is self-aware is going to look up at the sky and wonder the same things we do. Our lives are finite. Why are they finite? Why can't we live forever? Who put us here? What is the first truth? What is the first? Why? I think anybody that looks up in the sky and dreams and looks at the stars, which I imagine that anybody who can actually look up and knows that the stars are there, and they have to be around every planet that ever existed because they're all going to ask the same questions. What is that up there? Why are they there?
Yeah, and I think one thing to be sure is that if you did meet an alien, this would not be the time where you would want to have a misstep in communication.
No.
Like, you would have to make sure that you are completely understood in your intentions. This would be the relationship that you couldn't mess up. And, I think that an alien is expecting you, like if you were to communicate with one, to have full eye contact. They want your attention. This wouldn't be something that you could kind of like pass off as a text. They really want to know that you are fully engaged, and you have to seem engaged, and they would know. I have a feeling that they would know whether or not they were being taken seriously. And this is something to think about because, I think in, I can't remember the science fiction film, but it's Klaatu, Baratu, Nikto.
Day the Earth Stood Still.
Yes.
Starring Michael Rennie as Klaatu.
I think one of the most important things about that film is that no one seemed to take him seriously or the character seriously. And, he was capable of, obliterating the entire Earth.
We couldn't even conceive of that. Like, this guy, he can't blow up the Earth. Yes, he can.
Yes, he can.
And he was going to.
And he didn't want to. He didn't really want to. He only God knows what his intentions were. That's the worst part, is that we lost something. It could have been a gift. It could have been something that, he was going to show us or share something. And whether or not we had a huge benefit or not is irrelevant, but we lost it. We lost something, and, we might have needed it. I don't know.
We might have. Well, listen, should we bring someone else on to have a conversation with us?
Of course, Robert, of course.
Okay, I'm going to throw out a link. We unfortunately, we can, Bob says Army of Darkness. I worked on that movie. I have a screen credit on Army of Darkness, just saying. Oh, wait, I that's the wrong link. I have to copy this link in the... wait, Cisco E says, no way in heck I make out with an alien. Ever see Species? Fuck that. I can understand that, but not every alien's like Syl. What if somebody... What about Barbarella or something? What if she's actually human, but whatever. So we'll put that in there. We'll see if anyone shows up. But let me ask you this. So you seem to not have any problems with getting it on with an alien.
It's true. And the reason why is because, the reason why is because they want to communicate. I mean, this is... intimacy is a form of communication.
Yes.
And like I said, it can't be sort of like something you push on the side. There will be rituals. I mean, look at Star Trek. Whenever they encounter an alien species, and they have a lot of ritualistic behaviors that happen on the starship. I mean, they have officers, Starfleet officers who are in contact with these individuals, and it's taken really seriously, Robert, really seriously. And I think that if we could learn anything from that alone, it's very similar to the naval aviators who are also officers, who are probably the ones having that first contact as well. So I think it's something that we need to learn from and realize that they are probably the most qualified individuals to be doing that.
I agree, but now let me ask you this. If you could have any kind of an alien, if you fantasize, what would be the kind of alien you would want to hook up with?
I would say, and this is very difficult to answer, but as of right now, and I probably did say this before, the aliens from Cocoon, like, they were really cool. And, like, they seem to like humans. They were here on Earth for a while, just a while, biding their time. And they kind of tolerated, our strange behavior, but they knew it was going to get strange. They knew we were going to get weird because the circumstance is not a normal circumstance. So I think they were incredibly friendly. They were willing to take us on voyages that were far away. They felt
They liked
safe.
us. They liked us.
They liked us, and I think that we would be so lucky to encounter an alien species like that. And the other thing I was going to say is I'm very, very curious about the alien species from District 9.
The prawns. The
prawns.
prawns.
The prawns.
The
And
prawns.
the reason why is because, they kind of, when they landed on Earth, and we kind of shoved them away, pushed them aside, didn't value them, they seem to have a very human quality about them when they were discovered. They were on that ship and they were desperate, right? They were starving, it was a very bad situation, but they seemed to be able to survive. And so I think that if we could learn anything from them, it's just being able to survive even under the harshest of conditions. And,
Yes.
I think that might be the key to us being able to travel long distances in space. So, if we ever want to achieve that milestone, we'd probably have to take some lessons from them on how they do it.
I agree. Now we're going to bring our friend from Argentina, Andy, is going to come on the show. Andy, welcome to Midnight Metal. Now, we can't have you stay long because we only have one channel to add people, so we'll do it quickly. But the real question, Andy, is, could you fuck an alien?
Well, if it looks like the alien in species, I could.
Yeah, but what if she turned into her actual self?
At least I have some pleasure before. So, well, yeah, it will. Everything go on great until one point, and then it will go bad. But at least I'll have some pleasure. That's it. I just want a few minutes with that girl. That's it.
Just a few minutes?
Well, or at least the amount of time she would like to give me. Maybe I can make her feel some way to give me a few hours, maybe a few days, maybe.
Show her how you do things down in Argentina. Yeah.
Well, yeah. We all have our ways.
So let me ask you this, Andy. Do you believe in extraterrestrial life? And if so, do you believe that these unidentified aerial phenomenon could actually be, or what is the Hawaiian, the cigar-shaped asteroid Onimunu, whatever it was, the Hawaiian name that would means traveler or whatever?
Okay, first of all, 100% yes. I don't want to say of course, but yes, absolutely, I do believe there are intelligent beings, whatever, who knows. But the thing is that the real question is not if there is life out there. The question is, are we able to experience it? Are we able to know they are there? Because I was thinking about this a few days ago because, you've been talking about this for months already. And the thing is that maybe if there are aliens, are we going to be able to see them or hear them or touch them? Maybe they have a form that is incomprehensible for us.
Right. I agree.
Maybe this is my point. I believe in science, but science can explain only so much, and science can go as far as they can, and there are so many things they can't explain, and they can only assume or suppose or hypothesize. They can even explain everything in this planet.
That's right.
There are many things, maybe underwater or in some faraway areas that are maybe too dangerous for people, that maybe they haven't found things in this planet. And we are asking them to find things in some other planets? I believe it's too much. So maybe there are things, I believe human beings have a great imagination, and that's great, all right? But there are things that maybe are outside our imagination. And maybe we are completely surrounded by aliens, but we can't know because we don't have the capability to sense them.
Well, we can't even see the same light spectrum that certain animals can. We can't hear things that dogs can hear. You know, and if you think about it, human beings we can only how far down underwater can we go without breathing apparatuses, or even if we free dive, we can't. I mean, you could go down miles into the ocean. We can't survive down there. You go up higher than Mount Everest, you can't breathe. So even our own biosphere, we only exist in a very small portion of our own planet.
We haven't explored every single life form in this planet. We haven't. So if we have mysteries in our own backyard, how can we explain mysteries? Who knows what far away? You know what I mean? That's I think a logical explanation.
Well, then let me ask you this question. There's a lot of people that would say, that's right. So why spend money? Why make the attempt? Why bother? Like if the universe, if the cosmic void is unknowable, why should we even try? We're never going to know the answers.
Should I answer in a funny way or in a serious way? Because I have two types of answers. All right.
I think you should both ways. Why not?
Yes.
Well, the fun way will be we should actually explore because it's fun and it brings our imagination outside, and we can think about stuff that are crazy and everything, and that's a whole lot of fun. The serious answer is because the people who are in control keeps us entertained. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We are entertained about stuff that if it existed, or maybe if we could sense them, they would never tell us. They would never just flat out say, yes, there are UFOs or whatever they are called now outside. They will never do it if maybe they can harvest some power or some shit. You know what I mean? So I have like a fun answer and a serious answer. I don't want to be like, all negative and shit. I like science fiction. I like to think about going to some other planets and explore new life and, just imagine shit. But I not even know if I will be able to experience it. You know what I mean? There are so many things that we cannot think about.
I know.
Our imagination only goes so far, right?
Well, because there are things we can't. We can only imagine things that we vaguely know of. But there's things in the universe that we don't know and we can't even imagine because we've never experienced them ever collectively in our human history.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reason why 9 times out of 10 we anthropomorphize the aliens. The aliens always have 2 legs and 2 arms, and maybe they can transform into us. So they have like a very rough shit, like an octopus, like in the 99 the octopus alien in the Galaxy Quest. Remember in Galaxy Quest,
Yes.
they were like octopuses, but
The
they could
Thermians.
transform. Yeah, but they could transform into beings like us. It's always the same shit. And yes, of course, we can turn them into, I don't know, some other shapes that are not like planes, but it's the same thing. Or air things that look like planes. They just change the form. For me, it's kind of lazy. Maybe they can think about some form of transportation that is not like a plate or a balloon or whatever. and maybe they can think about a being that is not, oh, they can transform into human and they can speak very well English. All right, why don't they speak Spanish for once?
You make a really good point with this, because even our own physical form, for a long time, they would say the human body is made up of this percentage of water or this percentage of nitrogen. And they kind of strayed away from the fact that we also have microorganisms all through our body, millions of them, bacteria, whatever, that are living normally in our body, in our gut. And that's another area that hasn't really been touched upon when it comes to making contact, or even being used as a vehicle to make contact with aliens or even other species. So I think it'd be interesting to kind of looking at it, away from the anthropomorphization and kind of looking at what we are actually made of as beings.
Are you saying there's midi-chlorians inside of us?
I'm saying there's a lot of bacteria and other microorganisms, and they could be used to communicate with other species. We don't know, like that might happen. So
No, I know, I agree with you. And the funny thing is one of, I think, the problems that human beings have is we can only perceive the world from our perspective in terms of our size and our way of moving around the planet. Like, we don't know what it's like to be a foot tall or to exist on the submicroscopic level. Our entire perception of the universe is based on our size, and what we need to function. I remember when I was in college, I read a book by a guy named Edward T. Hall. I never forgot it, called The Hidden Dimension. And it was all about architecture and space, like the kinds of space that we inhabit. Like, why do we build rooms a certain size? Why do we like vaulted ceilings? And how do we, like, some societies, I mean, this might be kind of gross, but some societies, you want to be able to smell your fellow human being. That's all part of the perception of how certain societies work. Other societies don't work that way. But it was all about the spaces that we live in. And it was something that I had never, ever thought about. But once you become acutely aware of these things, whenever you walk into a building, for instance, you're looking at the lobby and you're wondering, what is the space? What was the architect thinking when they designed, like, when you have ceilings that are 20 feet high, the only reason that ceilings that they serve no purpose in terms of utilitarian needs, it becomes more aesthetic and it becomes more like it's all about your perception, and being in a room that's bigger than you are, that's much taller than you are, gives you a different scale and sense of self. When you walk into a room that has a low ceiling, it's oppressive. You suddenly are, but you walk into a room that has vaulted ceilings or 20-foot high ceilings and light is streaming in, the perception of where you are and how you're living your life completely changes, in terms of just space. And it was something that I'd never even considered before until I read this book. And you go through different civilizations and where people live and how people live. Like, Americans are lucky because we do have lots of space. We still wide open spaces, and McMansions have a lot of this empty negative space that we're never even going to utilize. We'll have giant foyers where you might have double steps going into this gigantic, in a mansion or something. Like, what do you need that for? And this is all perception issues that change that we're not even aware of, nor do we think about them. Like, I never walk, now I do because I read that book, but you walk into a building and suddenly the experience of that building, like, I remember the first time I went to New York, one of the first things we did was go to the top of the World Trade Center, out on the roof. We went on the roof, and I remember I had never seen, coming from Seattle, I had never seen. There was a courtyard with a giant like globe with a World Trade Center, and you'd stand and you'd look up. I'd never seen anything that big in my life. Like I'd never seen, even New York. The first time I went there, because the corridors of buildings, like in Seattle, the tallest building when I was a kid was 50 stories tall. And it was one building, and it was in the middle of the city. It was the Seafirst Bank building. My dad worked in it, and there was nothing really around it. You know, it towered. You go to New York, and there's corridors of buildings that are 80 stories tall. I mean, you can look down for a mile, you know, in Manhattan, Midtown, or whatever, and just there's every building is taller than 50 stories, and it blew my mind. I mean, like I'd seen how many movies I'd seen that took place in New York, but when you get there, my perception of what a city was changed. I realized I've never really been in a city. Like New York was really, I grew up in Seattle, but New York was the first city I was in because it was so different. In the World Trade Center, sitting in that courtyard, when you're there, you're looking up. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. And then when I have a picture of my sister and I on the roof, because you could go out on the roof, and it was just it was mind blowing, and my entire perception of what a city was. I thought I knew what a city was, but in 1990, when I went to New York City for the first time, I realized I didn't know. Because until you've been in a city like New York, you really have no idea. You can see the movies, you can look at the pictures, you don't know what it's like until you've actually stood there. And it completely opened up my perspective on the world. And that was just me going to one city.
I was thinking about one thing like this about our perception, and if we would be able to respond to aliens, however their form could be. And I was thinking about something very stupid but very interesting at the same time. There is a song about the artist Moby, you know?
Yeah.
There's an official video of him about 3 little aliens walking around the walk. It's a very famous song. I don't remember the name of the song, but it's like a near 2000 song. And the official video clip, you know, the video for the song, there are 3 aliens. They are this big, you know. They're walking around the block with 3 signs that's saying hi, hello, and hola.
It's called. I think it's called "In This World." Yeah.
Right. It's a great song, and the thing is that nobody pays attention to them because they are so small, and the only one that pays attention to them and says hi is Moby, of course. But it's a very interesting thought that maybe there are aliens everywhere, and maybe we just don't pay attention to them. Maybe they are microscopic. How can we know?
That's true too.
How can we know? You know? And another thought that I have that is a different one is about the gods, because a while ago I saw the Star Trek episode about Apollo, you know, and in a part of that episode, Kirk says something very real. Why? What if this God that is calling himself a God is a very, very powerful being that has some unexplicable powers that came to Earth, and because people were so ancient, they couldn't explain it, and they just start calling them God, and they have magic and powers. What if all that is science, is all the way they behave, and because we can't explain it, we just call it magic? Maybe there are aliens that they are like some shape, form, or power that we could call only magic and gods, because we have a limit to our imagination. Even if we have a great imagination, we have a limit. We can only think so far. You know what I mean?
No,
our levels of comprehension are limited. It's true. I mean, you're right. What do you think, Robert?
Well, no, I mean, I always loved that episode because, you know, Arthur C. Clarke used to say any sufficiently advanced technology would appear as magic to people that didn't understand it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably true. I mean, I liked that episode a lot because these aliens came to a primitive, you know, they were literally on Mount Olympus. All the pantheon of Roman or Greek gods were we're aliens, and I think Apollo. I think that episode is a very sad episode of Star Trek. It's called Who Mourns for Adonais, and I really love that episode because and Michael Forrest plays Apollo because he's basically a lonely guy that wants friends. And
the girl is sad for him. He doesn't worship him. He's sad. He want to keep him company.
Yeah, and he's like, look, I'll give you everything you want.
Right.
I just want you to worship me, but it's not really. I just want you to appreciate me. It's really what he wants, and ultimately, we all want that. Like we are all Apollo, and why that episode was so good. Why I've always liked that, and look, one of the great things about Star Trek, the original series, that modern Star Trek couldn't ever do, is this episode is monumentally goofy at first glance. I mean, a god of Olympus literally wearing laurel leaves and his garb and his sandals
and the temple. Place where he is.
But that's only the surface of it all. I mean, the idea is the concept is so great because turning the gods into ancient astronauts, and really, this god is he's just lonely and he wants friends like all of us. All of us are Apollo, and it's like do we want people to worship us literally? Well, no, but we still want people to love us. We want people in our lives to love us, that want us, that lust for us, that we all want that. Because that's the connection, that kind of intimacy or that kind of desire from a fellow human being is what everybody needs. We need that because we want to believe that the one thing in this universe that human beings can provide to one another is if someone else loves you, it's proof that you're here. It's proof that your life matters beyond you. It is something that you can't get any other way. If another human being loves you, truly loves you like a spouse or a significant other, you can't beat that for existence. Like I can sit here and make as many movies as I want in my life, and I can read my comic books and watch my physical media and play with my action figures. None of that can ever replace the love of another human being.
Right.
It just can't. And that's what that episode was really about. Sure, it's a great science fiction concept and all that, but it's like when Apollo meets Carolyn Palamas, the archaeologist or the specialist, the beautiful blonde woman that he takes as like his bride. You get it. You understand, like, okay, this guy's just a dude who wants a hot girl to love him. And at the end of the day, she doesn't. She just is like, I'm just studying you, dude. Like, it's interesting what you're doing, and I appreciate. I mean, she kind of did love him because, come on, let's face it, he was a baller. But she's like, she also has her duty to the ship, and Kirk appealed to her. Kirk appeals to her. She's like, I'm kind of swept away by this Olympian god, and Kirk's like, you work for me, babe. You work for the Enterprise, and enough of this bullshit. You have to spurn him and do what I tell you, because we have a military command here, and we're gonna get stuck. And she does, and it's tragic. It's tragic. Like they literally had real,
like from black to white, and then Apollo is like, what is happening here? What do you think, RM?
Oh yeah, you just watched it, Andy. Wait, hang on. Did you just watch that episode because you're watching Star Trek?
No. A few episodes ago, I'm on the episode 12 or it was in the first episode. The second.
But what I mean is, you actually just watched, like for the very first time, Who Mourns for Adonais.
Absolutely.
And this is what I love. So Andy has been watching classic Trek for the very first time.
Wow.
So you just watched Who Mourns for Adonais.
Absolutely, I just did.
So what did you think of that episode?
You're asking me or?
Yeah. I want to know because you're like a case study. To watch Star Trek now and the fact that you're liking it, that episode in particular, I'm curious what you think.
Actually, I thought about Star Trek the motion picture, about some similarities. Because if we compare the loneliness and the sense of not having a purpose in life, in eternal life, always the same thing. Eternal life without a purpose is not a happy life. You don't have anything to do. It doesn't matter how much power you have, how many people you can control. If you don't have anybody to be with you, to share the life with you, to recognize, to give you some acknowledgement, And when I saw that Apollo episode, first of all, it's very sad for Apollo. And the second thing is the same thing that happened to V'ger. V'ger didn't have a purpose. She or it or whatever needed a purpose. When Decker decided to stay with her or with V'ger, he gave purpose to that sentient being that we don't know what it is. And Apollo wanted that. There are many episodes. I've only watched like 43 episodes. That's it. I have a long way to go, all right? But the thing is, there are so many episodes that talk about eternal life versus purpose and happiness. Is eternal life happy? Is it? If you have all the years ahead of you and you don't have any challenge, you don't have any surprise, you don't have anybody to share it with because everyone dies, what do you make of your life? And it's so interesting to think about that because people are so afraid of death. And I believe that instead of thinking about death, you have to think about life. You have to think about doing something with your life. That's why I try to stay busy. I try to be creative. I love every time you and John speak about, having a purpose, doing something with your time, every day doing something to get you closer to the object, like John Campea always says. That's very true. Because if we are always preoccupied on, when we die, what are we doing while we're living? And if we always asking for eternal life, what are we going to do the rest of the whatever? You know what I mean? Who is going to be with us? You know what I mean? Everybody should have eternal life that way, and it will be total chaos, or at least in my mind. You know what I mean? So I love that many episodes talk about the fear of death, eternity. Is eternity happiness? Purpose. There are so many episodes that talk about that. And the thing is that before I saw Star Trek the motion picture for the first time, because I tell you that I saw the Star Trek the motion picture before I started the original series, because I just wanted to have like a small taste to see if I like the characters and that, and I love them. So I said I need to go back to this. But the thing is that there is so interesting, and the thing is, I close myself to special effects, fight scenes, some horrible acting sometimes, and stuff like that. Well, I'm sorry. But the thing is that when you put all that aside and you just focus on the story and on the discussion they are giving to you, the episodes are giving the people who are watching a discussion, something to think about. And it's not stupid. It's not, saying swear words in a starship or being sad all the time or shit like that. It's things that are very interesting. And you know what's the most important thing? There are timeless discussions. Mm-hmm. It's not going to get old to think about eternal life. It's not going to age badly to think about death and purpose. Those are timeless subjects. That's the reason why a 66 show can be enjoyed by somebody in the 2021, and I see them and I don't feel this is a very old show, I can't enjoy it. I feel completely the opposite. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's my thought. You can rotate me now.
It's very interesting what you're talking about, because we all agree that the most important thing about Star Trek is the quality of the work. And when you have a quality program, it makes a lasting impression on you that lasts a lifetime. So, those are the sorts of things that you take with you from when you wake up in the morning to when you go to sleep at night. And it's thought-provoking. And honestly, I think it improves the viewer. Maybe you're seeing things from a new perspective, or something But the other thing
100%.
that I wanted to say in regards to this episode, it's really important in the sense of, you know, the emotional state of an alien that you are meeting. So what do I mean by this? You know, if you look at humans and Vulcans, they've got different emotional states. It's obvious. He made this comparison so that you could see that some aliens are more emotional than others. Well, what about the types of aliens that you might meet that you can't even tell whether emotion is important to them?
Right.
And so now you're presented with an idea. Okay, the Vulcans are suppressing their emotions. We knew that. We understand that. That's what their species does. But what about for a group of aliens that emotion may not necessarily be something that's important to them in the way that they communicate? I mean, I can't imagine not having an emotional response either to an alien or to another human being in a day-to-day life. So this is something that I think may be an issue, especially when it comes to gods, because the idea that gods have an eternal lifespan, our lifespan is like 2 weeks compared to theirs, which goes on forever and ever. Or less, right? The idea that our emotions and concerns would be perceived to be something that is not as important to them, or may not have the magnitude of influence that an emotion that they may carry can have. And so, like, the worst thing that can happen to you, you meet a person and things are going great, you have a great relationship with them, and then all of a sudden they ghost you. Well, guess what? You don't know what their emotions are because they're not in contact with you. That feels terrible. It feels terrible to be cut off like that. You feel more comfortable if you knew the person was a Vulcan. You said, okay, he's a Vulcan. I knew this could happen. He's not going to give me any emotional response. This God knows he's better than I am. This God can change this God can change day into night and night into day. I already know that there's something different about this being. But when you meet an alien species and you can't make that emotional connection, it's a fear. Like it's a fear of mine that, you would be confronted with this and you couldn't make that emotional connection. So I think, although the episode doesn't quite say that, I think in a lot of times in Star Trek, it's a theme that we have to deal with the fact that we are emotional beings as human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
And at the same time, there is another episode that I totally love because I wasn't expecting the end. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the episode, all right? But the thing is...
I'll remember it.
Yeah,
Robert, you'll remember. Yeah, you'll remember it. But the thing is that there's an episode where the starship is encountered the Klingons, I think, for the second time. This is the first time this real power general of the Klingons, and you have like the Kirk and their guys and the Klingons on this planet, and on this planet there are very peaceful people living there.
Yeah, you're talking about the very first episode where the Klingons are introduced. It's called Errand of Mercy with John Colicos playing Kor. He was the first.
What is it? What is the name of the people that are so hopeless and they are there?
The Organians.
The Organians. So it's so interesting that the Klingons and the people from Earth, they are so powerful. They know everything. They know how to protect people. They know how to tell them what they need to feel. Because we already know. We don't need nobody to tell us something new, right? And it's so interesting that you spend the whole episode thinking about black versus white, and I'm not talking about the races here, all right? Black versus white, and white versus black, and who's gonna beat the other one? Who's gonna be the one? Oh yeah, and we have this third party. They don't matter because they are hopeless. Poor people. And at the end of the show, they are like, you know what? We had enough of this, all right? We are so above you, and it's not a matter of you don't have any value. It's not like that. It's like we are so much evolved than you. We have evolved above from violence and murder and shit like that. We don't think about that. We not even know what that really is because we not even remember when that happened. maybe millennia ago. And these two parties are so self-aware about being so powerful. No, we are going to conquer you. We are going to tell you the rules. And the other guys, you're thinking about the hero, Kirk, the hero. And what is doing this? Our hero is telling you, we are going to protect you. Shit, you're going to protect me. We are going to tell you how it is, and that's it. And it's so interesting because that happens at the end of the episode. And I'm spending all the episodes thinking, all right, war, confrontation, let's see who wins. Oh, okay, this is not the story, and this is not the discussion. What if we encounter some beings that are so beyond our comprehension of confrontational, of telling somebody if they are like us, if they are different from us, they should be our enemies. And maybe we have to fight them because they have a way of living that is so different from us that we perceive them as the enemies. And they perceive us as the enemies. And we have a third party that's so evolved that they tell us, we don't gotta get this shit anymore. You are not going to be able to do anything until you leave this place. And that's it. And both of them are like, what? And then the expression on Kirk, that's why William Shatner is an incredible actor. The expression on Kirk when he realizes that he's so powerless, and he changed his face completely. He says he stayed like that, smirk and all that, and then, no, we were really meaning something else. And then he realizes he's nothing. It doesn't matter how big the ship is. It doesn't matter how big is the explosion he can make with the ship. You are nothing because you're thinking about violence. And they are about that. What if we have aliens that are so evolved that they watching us? They are watching us destroy our planet, destroy each other, and they think, these are not interested people. Let's just go somewhere else. What if?
Yeah, this is a good point. And they probably don't even have a word for violence in their vocabulary anymore because was in some sort of behavior that existed millennia ago. And it doesn't mean anything anymore. So, that's another thing to consider too.
And it's so interesting.
It is very interesting. And if we were going to say that we believed that these cultures are going to be easily communicatable with us, then we would have to go ahead and assume that we know what their life experiences are like. And that's the other interesting part about all this is that somehow at some point we're going to have to ask this alien species, like, what is your background? What makes you alien species A? What is it that defines you? What's important to you? All these characteristics are going to be dissimilar from our experiences. I mean, they're going to be, something that we're going to have to learn from. And there will be words that we hear that we don't have a definition for.
Absolutely.
Well, I think one of the great things about this particular episode that you're talking about is what's very interesting is that both the Klingons and the Federation, they make assumptions about the Organians based on the external perception of, well, this is a pre-industrial civilization, and they're walking around and they're making, and both, what's very interesting is both the Federation and the Klingons are making their pitch to the Organians. They're like, we will come and take this planet. And the Federation's like, the Klingons will take it. Listen, we'll make sure nothing happens to you. And the Organians like, listen, we got this. Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. And Kirk's like, what do you mean don't worry about it? They're going to attack your people. They're going to, and the Klingons are like, wow, you're like sheep. And it's very interesting when finally at the end, when the Organians say, look, okay.
It's the last minute. It's just the last minute of the episode. Yeah,
and we're like, we made us look this way so to serve you. Like we're hosts, and this entire civilization that we've manufactured so you guys could look at us. Like none of this. All of us are being good hosts. And when they finally are realize when they're energy beings, the non-corporeal existence that they have, and they basically freeze the controls of all the ships, and you watch both Kirk and Kor, the Federation and the Klingons, want to go to war. They're ready to fight. They want to have this battle.
Absolutely.
And when the Organians like, you guys are both of you are douchebags. Like let's
when
be
that
clear.
happens, I stood like that. What is happening?
Yeah, let's be clear. You, the Federation, and you, the Klingons, you equally are douchebags. You're both of you, and we're not going to let you fight. We're going to freeze the controls of your ships. We're not going to let you fight. And it's so interesting because it wasn't just the humans. It wasn't just the Federation that realized it. The Klingons also realized they're not stupid. They're like, we get it too. and yet they're more warlike. So what's so great in that episode, and John Colicos, he was the first Klingon we ever saw playing Kor, he even gets it, and he's like, I get it. I understand the point that is being made in this episode. I understand. This is not the way we should be fighting. We shouldn't be doing this. But then it's so awesome at the end of the episode, he's like, but it would have been glorious. You know, he's like, you know what? If we could have fought, it would have been awesome. But I get it. You know, and that was, and it shows that this is why Star Trek, the original series, was brilliant. Klingons were not enemies. They were antagonists. They're set up as enemies, but at the end of that episode, the Federation and the Klingons are in exactly the same place. And Kor and Kirk like each other. When Kor didn't know that didn't know that Kirk's pretending he's Barona, Kor liked Barona. And Kirk liked Kor, and that was the whole point. That's why I can't stand modern Star Trek. It's like, oh, this guy's a villain. Everyone's a fucking villain. And if you watch that episode, they weren't villains. They just came from a different point of view. And that whole episode, you think you're watching two guys that are on opposite sides of the fence develop a mutual admiration, which they did, but because we're still with our heroes, we actually watch Kirk want to go to war.
Absolutely.
We watch him, and at the end, he's like, fuck, I want to go to war. Like, he's embarrassed. He's embarrassed.
Yeah. It's like watching a computer game simulation.
Yes, there is an episode with a computer simulation.
Yeah.
Yes, but I'm, like as an example, and they had to go through these exercises in order to come to this conclusion at the end of the episode. Because I don't believe that there would have been any other way that they would have been able to understand what was going on in any other circumstance. There would be nothing that you could have told either side to explain what was going on and what the purpose of the exercise was that would make them stand down.
But also, in that episode, it's so interesting that the discussion of the episode, what makes you think, is not only these beings that look like they were sheep, they are so above us because they evolved beyond violence. That's not the only discussion. The discussion that is very interesting is, what if our heroes are really the antagonists? In that episode, the antagonists were the Klingons and the Federation. And the good guys were the ones who were oppressed. So the episode presents so interesting discussion. Mm-hmm. What if our heroes, the one they are, the good guys, are the antagonists because they don't know better? They do not.
From enemies to allies.
It's incredible.
Well, Andy, on that note, I'm gonna let you go. What a great discussion! Thank you so much for coming on
Andy,
tonight.
Seeing you
all the way from Argentina. I love talking Star Trek. This was fantastic. I'm
Absolutely, man.
I love hearing your about your journey through the series.
Yeah, man. Absolutely, I'm loving it.
So it's great to have you here. Thanks so much for being here, Andy. That was what a great discussion. Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm going to throw out we got more people coming in. Oh, this is a good one. But first, I want to get through some super chats and tips with you, my dear.
Yeah.
I don't mean, when I say my dear, I don't mean to be demeaning. That's just a figure speech. So our friend Sonny Dominguez sends in a tip and says, I watched 2 documentaries this week, one on Rita Moreno and the other on the band Sparks.
Yes.
I went in not familiar with either subject. I was highly disappointed with the Rita doc. It left me feeling uninspired and meh about her. The Spark Stock, by the way, directed by Edgar Wright, created a new fan and inspired me on multiple levels.
Wow.
I'm a big Sparks fan. I can't wait to see that documentary. Edgar Wright, of course, of Baby Driver and Shaun of the Dead and Spaced fame, made this documentary. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing that. I'm glad you dug that, Sonny. I'm disappointed to hear that. I'm a huge Rita Moreno fan. I'm sorry the documentary didn't inspire you. But I do want to watch it. Are you? Do you know Rita Moreno? Do you want to watch that documentary?
Yes, I do. I am very familiar with the documentary. The documentary is called Just a Girl Who Decided to Go For It.
Yes.
And the way that it's been presented is that Rita Moreno talks about how difficult it was for her facing bias in the studio system at the height of, Latin influence on Hollywood.
Right.
So, that's an issue in the story. And I know that Lin-Manuel Garcia makes comments in it, and how Sofia Vergara talks about how influenced she was with Rita Moreno. So, there's like a great level of expectation for this documentary. And
yes.
I was supposed to see it before, but my mother and I are going to see it tomorrow. After our doctor's appointment. So, I'm looking forward to seeing it. So it sounds exciting. And I'm sad to hear that, he was disappointed in the documentary.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I obviously he didn't go into why, but I still want to see it because I'm a big Rita Moreno fan myself. So,
yeah.
Our friend Paul from Twin Flicks sends in a tip and says, aliens may not even want to bother and waste their energy coming here and project crafts or send probe ships to Earth so they won't have to come here themselves. I mean, obviously, one of the things that makes sense is to send drones or probes because the energy costs of keeping a living being alive in a spaceship traveling past or across interstellar distances is enormous. So the idea, I would imagine that drones and robot ships, especially as, like, we're watching over the last 50 years, artificial intelligence and our computer powering has grown exponentially. So it would make sense that you could fly or send out artificial intelligence-equipped drones or ships or probes. They should be all over the galaxy. That makes far more sense. So I would agree with that. They wouldn't have to come here themselves, but they would have, I would imagine the technology would be so advanced that they could talk to us or hang out. Like, what do you think?
I agree. And I just assumed that they were always doing this. And, it seems to make sense. We send out drones and, satellites and all sorts of tech. And, obviously, I think that one of them has probably picked up on one of those satellites out there and knows that we're here. And, they're kind of trying to figure out when the right time is going to be, because they don't want it to be like a War of the World situation. Like, that's their...
No, they might have, look at our technology. There might be dandelions that are actually very sophisticated drones. And,
right.
and when you blow on a dandelion, that's actually an alien drone that was put here and has been monitoring the planet for millennia already. We wouldn't know.
True.
There might be submicroscopic. We swallow those things, and we actually have alien probes inside of us that are mapping the human genome and our bloodstreams and our circulatory systems and
a real life inner space.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. Nice reference too. Yeah.
I also think that I think a lot of those pilots that, reported what they saw probably saw a lot more, but for whatever reason, initially a lot of what they saw was kind of discounted and pushed aside. So they probably saw a lot more than what we know.
I would tend to agree with that too. Darth Plato, who I think should be the official. I don't know Darth Plato that well. I mean, I only know him. I haven't had any direct interaction, but he has to be the resident historian of the Burnettwork. I mean, I've got a cheesemonger, I've got an official couple. I've got different people, but I think Darth Plato is the unofficial historian of this channel. Darth Plato says the ancients used to imagine monsters and sexy goddesses living on the islands of the Aegean. Mm-hmm. Turn the page. Now we know they're just islands. Now we have transplanted the imagination to space and other planets. Turn the page. I think that's probably true to a certain extent. Although, we have a lot more understanding of the natural world than we did back when people were believing these things lived on islands in the Aegean. We know a lot more. But I think you're right that the impulse is the same.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think that, like the space race, what was imagined at that time in the 60s is taken for granted now. Like, we know we can go into space. It's a given, a whole generation growing up with that as a fact. Or just imagine the first person who ever, decided to use lenses to peer off into the sky. Or, or even try and map and figure out, celestial movements, whatever the motivation was, it's something that we take for granted. And we know, like, many of us will say, oh, this is what the constellations look like on your birthday. You remember that? Like in the 90s, that was a big thing on the computers. It's like, oh, you can put in your birth date and it'll show you what the constellations look like. But I think it's very interesting how we've progressed and what we accept as a norm, going forward. And seeing that progression, hopefully into a contact with an alien species one day.
Yeah. Twin Flicks. Twin Flick says, yes, we have another guest who's going to be coming on. Let me just get through a little bit more of these super chats.
Yes.
Twin Flick says aliens may not even have sex or have sexual organs or even that they may procreate in a completely different way. Mm-hmm. They might even look. I think they could be they could procreate in vats. In some industrial plant. They've moved beyond that. Because procreation's so icky. Let's do it more industrialized, and could be that way. I mean, I could see that happening.
That's why you need to bring a man with you. Like for me, I would have to bring a human male with me. Just in case things go awry.
Well, I think what's really interesting is one of the things about sexuality is, on one hand, there is a mechanical act that we need to use to procreate. Mm-hmm. And it is the mechanics are there. It's very simple. It's all that. But first of all, the act is so pleasurable, and it is also so intimate. And it also, once you move the act out of procreation mode, and you turn it into a way to be intimate with one another, it becomes a creative, artistic form of expression, where suddenly it's two people who are allowing your own physical being to be touched, and you interact, and it becomes something where you're delving into your creative force, your imaginative force, and when you're with somebody, that's where sexuality. To me, procreation and sexuality, it's like, on one hand, you can use a paintbrush to paint a house, a certain color, yellow, white, or you can use a paintbrush to paint the Mona Lisa. Same mechanical activity. You can paint your house, or you can paint the Mona Lisa. That's the difference between procreation and sexuality. But you're using a paintbrush for both, but the act is very, very different. And I think that's the whole point. That's the whole beauty of human sexuality. And on that note, I'm going to bring in Wakazashi can you hear us, sir? Oh, and we can hear you.
Yes.
Let me what do you think about that? So let me get this prepared, and I'm going to bring our friend here into the show. But what do you think about that sexuality? The paint, my paintbrush analogy. Do you buy it?
I think that it's it's a unique perspective on sexuality, and I think that a lot of sexuality is there is that physical act of, having physical contact. I also think that there's a mental part and a spiritual part to sexuality. Mm-hmm. And almost as important, the three together, because, like you have to, care about the person. Even if you just met them, you should have some sort of goodwill towards this person, the spiritual nature, you're both on the same vibe, you like each other, that's going to happen. Mentally, you have to, keep in mind that, what you're doing with this person, that, they deserve respect. And, you have to be in the right frame of mind to be intimate with someone. So, so that's the other part. And in regards to painting the Mona Lisa versus your house, it's like apples to watermelons, in difference. The delicacy and the gentleness of strokes that it would take to paint something as beautiful and as luscious as the Mona Lisa takes an incredible amount of skill and agility. And
you have to be a cunning linguist.
Absolutely. I mean, it involves all these wonderful things that a man or woman can do to create an incredible experience. Versus painting a house, of course, that's maybe that one's a fast and dirty version, but the beauty in comparing a masterpiece to sexuality is just really very pleasing to hear. That's very nice.
Agreed. Now we have a new guest. We have, I hope I get it right, Wakazashi joins us. Welcome to Midnight Metal, sir.
Hi.
Are you feeling metal tonight?
Hi, Rob.
How are you?
I am feeling metal, and I'm feeling a little bit nervous too.
Don't feel nervous. Now tell all the folks at home, where are you coming to us from?
Okay, I'm coming to you from Japan. In a small seaside town on the west coast called Yonago.
Ooh.
Now,
nobody's ever heard of.
Now, we've had you before. We've had you here before, and you have a pretty interesting story that I actually liked hearing. Why are you in Japan? Tell us how you got there.
I'm actually an alien, Rob. I'm an alien in Japan.
Or a worthless gaijin, right?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, like Sting.
Yeah.
Anyway, the real story is, I was working in a bit of a dead-end job for HMV. Do you remember HMV?
Oh, you know what? When the Beatles first came out on CD back in 87, 88, I had all the HMV. They came in LP-size sleeves. The CDs were there. And now...
Oh, really? Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and now the lovely Emma Bannon, who is a foundational member of the Post-Geek Singularity, she's buying me the HMV... She just got me the HMV special edition of the 2014 Godzilla. They're making... And HMV's putting out, like, Almost Famous. I am still buying HMV exclusive 4K discs.
Wow.
Well, I'm not. Emma Bannon is. She's selling them to me.
I didn't know they're still...
Yep.
Shout out to Emma.
Shout out to Emma
still
Bannon.
Doing exclusives.
Oh, yep. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. So anyway, at HMV, I was working there, and a good friend said, "Come on, let's go to Australia. Let's go there for a year." So I was like, "Okay, that sounds amazing." So quit the job, traveled to Australia, and within maybe 4 days, me and the friend were in a nightclub.
Of course you were.
And this beautiful Japanese woman across the floor. She was dancing with friends, and I was dancing with my friend. So we went over and started dancing with her, and she didn't punch me. It was fantastic. She didn't slap me. She let me dance with her. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Very romantic.
And you followed her all the way to the land of the rising sun. And how long has it been?
That's right.
How long has it been since you've been together?
We got together in 1998.
Wow.
So we got married in 2000. So 21 years, Rob, being married.
That's amazing. Congratulations for that.
Yes.
So now
I know you really want to go to Japan sometime. Is that right?
Oh, I think I've told you. You know, I have a Japanese shopper. I have a guy that's buying me stuff. I've wanted to go to Japan.
It's not me.
No. I've wanted to go to Japan for my whole life. I mean, since I was in the 70s, because I love Japanese cinema, and I love Japanese science fiction. I also love Japanese girls too. Like, well, let's be honest. I mean, of course, I love Elizabeth, but I've always, Japanese girls have always, ever since I saw the alien Japanese girls from Planet X in Godzilla versus the Astro Monster, wearing the black and the silver and the sunglasses, I'm like,
okay.
So
I
cool.
love Japanese girls. What can I say? Although they kind of scare me because I've seen Battle Royale and I've seen the world of what's the
great movie?
Yeah, a great movie. But Japanese schoolgirls scare me. Just so you know.
They scare me too.
Yeah, but you did okay. You went and found one. And now you're married for 20 years. But now let me ask you: do you believe?
Yeah.
Do you believe in extraterrestrials? Do you believe in UFOs?
It's a difficult question, and it was a fascinating discussion before you had with Andy. And sorry, I can't roll your name.
Yes.
I can't roll my R's. Oh, I'm so jealous, Rob. That's fantastic. Now you're just showing off.
I know, right? Hence the cunning linguist. Yeah, that's all I can say is. Yeah.
I love that.
James.
You know what I'm talking about.
Can I ask you? I do. Can I ask you both a question?
Sure.
Yes, please.
What do you think about the rumors, only rumors, that the original Apollo moon landing was filmed on Stanley Kubrick's 2001 set in wherever it was, in a studio?
Wasn't there a movie about that? What was it?
Yep. There's
What
all
was the
kinds of... Well, here's the thing.
Capricorn 1?
Yeah,
Capricorn. That's about the Mars,
was it.
but they went to Mars. But yeah, it was 1977, which I love. Yeah. Capricorn 1.
Yes, Capricorn 1.
There is. I'll tell you something about this, because I'm a huge proponent of the space program. There is a great video.
Me too.
There's a great video on YouTube about how we did not have the technology to fake the moon landing in 1969. We just didn't have the technology to do it. And in terms of broadcast, and so what's really interesting is that people want to believe that, oh yeah, they faked the moon landing. But I'll tell you something. There's a Japanese space probe. I want to say it's the Kaguya probe.
Okay.
I bought,
it
was the most expensive Blu-ray disc that I ever bought. Actually, no. Because the most expensive Blu-ray disc I ever bought was the Japanese release of UFO, the Jerry Anderson series UFO from the UK.
Ooh,
but this
Jerry
was
Anderson, yeah.
Yeah, this was a single disc, and it was the Kaguya probe was the first time that high definition cameras were ever taken up to the moon. Oh. And so this Blu-ray came out, and it's literally all it is the 4K or the high definition video of this probe flying over the moon. It was a Japanese probe. I want to say it was from 10 years ago.
Right.
Well, it flies over the moon landing sites. So it actually, on the disc, it shows you where, here's the Sea of Tranquility, and it zooms in, here's where the landing sites were. And now, when they land, they put receivers, you can fire laser light up and reflect back. All of that stuff is there now. It's you can see it. So no, I'm a big proponent of the moon landing. I know that it actually happened, and now we've gotten to the point where our technology can prove it, and we've now there's been multiple. People don't know this, but the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, they have a probe in orbit around Mars right now. So there's
no
three.
way.
Yeah. And of course, the Chinese now have a fully manned space station in orbit. There are 2 space stations in orbit around the Earth right now. One is a Chinese space station, and the other is the International Space Station. So
That's right.
I'm a huge fan of the space program, and like the Japanese also sending probes out into space with the technology, and they were the first people to send high definition cameras to the moon.
Yes, and to answer your question, my response would be there's a museum in New York called the Hayden Planetarium.
Yep.
And it's Neil deGrasse Tyson is, I guess the head of the whole thing. And, it has a lot of exhibits, it's a fantastic place to visit. They have a huge completely remade presentation that you can go into. But for me, one of the first times that I went to that museum, I walked in, and when you first walk in, they sort of like have an orders of magnitude section. You go past that, and right near the entrance are these, and I don't know the definition or quality of these photographs, but they are like what I think are probably super high definition photographs of the lunar landings. And these pictures are huge. Like it's much bigger than if you just opened up a book or looked on a computer screen. It takes up, like practically this, it's like the size of a house, the photographs are. And they're arranged in such a way so that you as the viewer can see, the landing site. And it's so expansive. They have a few modules there, the actual modules. I don't know. It's probably prototype modules.
Yeah.
But they have a few prototype modules there. They've got, 1 or 2 suits, I believe, in the area. And it's like impossible for you to say that it didn't take place because you can see pictures of the astronauts like on the moon itself. So, to answer that, what I would say is that I myself have, although I didn't pursue it or look for it, have, found myself in an Uber. And the Uber driver suddenly told me that, that lunar landings didn't exist, that none of that stuff happened. And you know what I did? I decided to just be kind and listen to what he had to say. And I said, well, I can understand how you might feel that way. And I took it in stride. And we're going to come across people who are going to say things like this. And, it didn't upset me. I wasn't upset by it, but there might be some people who get upset hearing these things, and we just have to take it in stride, that this is what he believes. There was nothing I could tell him that would have convinced him otherwise. There's nothing that, I could have done that would have convinced him otherwise. And I accept that. He seemed like a nice guy. And, that's what he wanted to believe. And, I left it alone, and I had a very good Uber ride. I got to the club that night and, had a great night. So, I just wanted to say that sometimes when we do hear things like this, just to, be kind, guys, be kind to one another out there, even when you hear things that upset you or, you think may not be right, unless the person is going to harm themselves, just be kind and, go on your day.
Now, let me ask you, Wakazashi, what do you think?
Wow. I believe the space program is real. I believe it's real. But it's fascinating to hear these different stories. And like our just said, people who believe in the conspiracy or whatever, they really believe. And no matter what you say,
I know.
You try and argue logically with them. It's like, yeah, but there's always a yeah, but. So, yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to get your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing about also another thing that people don't tend to remember is the byproducts of space research. Like one of my favorite things I ever heard was when you're in a capsule, when 3 guys are in a capsule, like in the command module, and they're breathing out, the capsule fills with moisture. So when that happens, of course, water will be dripping on things. And when you have a capsule that's full of electronics and circuits, you can't have a moisture environment. So how do you stop that from happening? So they had to heat up elements of the consoles to stop condensation from affecting the controls. So how do you do that? Well, one of the things they created was monofilament, pieces of metal that would heat up and keep the moisture away from systems. Well, what's interesting about that is once they figured out, okay, monofilaments, what can we do with that? Hair dryers.
Yeah.
Handheld hair dryers and monofilaments. You put a bunch of monofilaments in a hair dryer, lightweight metal that heats up, you blow air through it with a fan, and suddenly you can dry your hair. Like that kind of technology has spilled over into all Velcro, for instance. Again, used in the space program. All of these things were byproducts of space research. There has been medical technology. There are so many byproducts. Like, what's amazing to me right now is the fact that we have just decided to, we look at every booster rocket that SpaceX lands. They shoot a rocket into orbit. The rocket comes back and they can land it on a barge at sea. Now, we're like, yeah, sure, they can do that. The technology required to do what they're doing on a regular basis almost every other week is so extraordinary. It's so far beyond what NASA was doing 50 years ago. Every time I watch it, I sit there. The Starship. The Starship is fucking-enormous. And now that people laugh, it crashed a bunch of times. Yeah, like if you watch how many rockets we blew up trying to get to the moon, now, I mean, Elon Musk that Starship is so huge, and the way it comes back to Earth, it flops over on its side and comes down and then straightens up. They're going to send that motherfucker to orbit like next month. I mean, this technology, and they're just going. And you have a Japanese billionaire who's like, yeah, man, I'm going to fly in that ship and we're going to fly around the moon. You know, he has a whole website set up. He's looking to take people with him. And he's subsidizing some of what Elon Musk is doing. We and Americans, the world is like, yeah, whatever. We are watching, we're basically watching the Christopher Columbus's ship being built in front of us. The technology, we are going to sail out. Like, I'm never going to see it. You know, I'll see some of it. I'm right here on the edge. But this is one of the most transformative things that humanity has ever done. And Elon Musk is building it before. And now Jeff Bezos is doing it. Richard Branson's finally going to ferry people to near-Earth orbit. Finally. I mean, after 15 years. I mean, but still, he didn't give up. What we're living in this time where it's amazing to me that we have reusable spacecraft, and at the same time, we've got people marching into our Capitol building complaining. I mean, and bitching and moaning, and we have this weird dichotomy because I think people don't understand exactly how amazing the time we're living in right now is. It is so weird that you have people talking about critical race theory, which is just, I mean, we are so far, I'll use the word, our civilization is being retarded, not that we are being retarded, the actual word retarded, not using it in talking about people. It's a
regression.
It is a regression now that, and I don't get why it's happening. Like our civilization was doing very well, thank you, allowing a diversity, allowing all kinds of people. We have been completely derailed in the last 5 or 6 years, and this idea that now we're living through the best time humanity has ever existed on this planet. Do we have to do better? Yes. But this idea that there are people taking this ground where they're saying, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. It's so weird because on the flip side of that, technologically, we are making incredible advancements. People are achieving things they've never been able to achieve before. There's opportunity. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what your sexuality is, what your religious preference is. Right now, there is so much out there that you can take, and yet our institutions, our academia has turned into some weird, bizarre, Gilead, like I don't get it at all. And I really don't understand, because we were doing great, and now we've been completely derailed, and people are like, let me tell you what you are. I'm like, what we are is awesome. Humanity is awesome. And the fact that you're branding people, this, ists or whatever, I'm like, are you kidding me? We're doing amazing shit across the planet. I mean, and by the way, everybody is contributing. Everybody's contributing. And yet, especially in this particular country, we have a huge problem. And I don't quite understand what it is, because even in this country, we are leading the way and doing some amazing stuff. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Rob?
Oh, sorry. No, this is a good point, and I did want to ask both of you this question. And like, diversity has been around forever, and there's always been independent films that have addressed that diversity issue, and foreign films that have addressed this, which have been recognized worldwide. So there was never a situation necessarily about that issue, as far as I'm concerned. My question is in regards to Capricorn 1. You asked a good question about, the theory of it. But obviously a film was made. What was it, 1970, Robert?
77. Capricorn 1 was 77.
What was behind even making that film, out of curiosity?
Well, I mean, I think that it took this idea, this popular idea, and look, in the 1970s, the conspiracy thriller reigned supreme. Whether it was 3 Days of the Condor, the Parallax View, because of Vietnam, because of Watergate, because of the Kennedy's assassination, because of Martin Luther King's assassination, there was such distrust of the government coming out of the conspiracy thriller reigned supreme. And I love, even now, I love conspiracy thriller movies, and I think they took a pop culture conspiracy, which is that we really didn't go to the moon. The Van Allen belt, nobody could survive the radiation. We couldn't do it. And so they made, Peter Hyams made this movie. And by the way, it was 5 years after the last moon landing. That movie came out, Capricorn 1 came out. The last time America sent men to the moon was in 1972. Mm-hmm. Can you believe that?
Yes.
How far we have fallen.
The film had two white men and a black man who were the astronauts, correct? Mm-hmm. So even that film was diverse, and that was in 1970, and it was serious. Like, they were legitimate astronauts in the story. So, there was no situation with diversity, because clearly, they presented a situation that was realistic. That was NASA at the time. So,
all of that. It's so bizarre. It's so weird that people, what I find really interesting is there are people that are now, whether it's Robin DiAngelo writing White Fragility, like I find it really interesting that people have couched this as the issue of the day. I honestly say, you know what? I just like people. Like, since I was a little kid, I've told people the first woman I ever had a crush on was Nichelle Nichols. To me, I didn't even understand when I was 5 years old that she was black. She was just Lieutenant Uhura. That's what she looked like. I didn't delineate the crew. I'm just like, that's what she looked like. I loved her. Like, I thought she was the most beautiful woman I ever saw in my life. She was the most beautiful woman I ever saw. I didn't get it. It wasn't until I was 8 years old that I first encountered somebody with racism, and I didn't understand. I had a conversation with my dad. I'm like, I really was like, but Dad, I'm like, Lieutenant Uhura is like, why wouldn't anyone like her? Mm-hmm. She's beautiful. Why wouldn't you, It was so weird. But now we're in a place where people are saying, oh, you are born a race. It's so weird. You're born a race. I'm like, dude. I look at it this way. There are beautiful women of every shape, size, color, and creed on this planet. I'd love to meet them all. I'm like, there is no there. And I'm like, I've never understood. If you like people, if you travel around the world, and that's one of the problems. 65% of Americans don't even own passports, and I think You know what cures racism pretty quickly? Traveling around the world. You get over your xenophobia and hatred of different people very, very quickly, because you realize that you'll meet
totally.
people. You'll meet people you can party with across the planet, and they're all different shapes, sizes, colors, and creeds, and they're all fun, man. And I'll tell you, when you travel, especially when you travel to Europe, like you said, Australia. I lived in Sydney for a year. What a cosmopolitan city. And let me tell you, it doesn't matter who you meet or what color they are. You'll have a good time. I mean, there is a good time to be had. And if there's one thing I've learned in my life, is that the entire planet Earth is filled with awesome people that you will have an awesome time with if you just open up your mind and meet them. Because my God, if the first time I ever went to Europe, I went to Barcelona for a film festival. And
nice.
It's just so. The first night we actually went out. It was the second night I was there. It was one of the longest nights and one of the most fun nights of my life. And we started out with a couple of people. By the end of the night, there was like 30 of us from all over the world. And I wound up taking off my clothes and jumping into the Mediterranean in front of everyone. I'm like, there's no way that I'm coming here from the United States without jumping into the Mediterranean. And I just stripped off all my clothes in front of these 30 people that I had met that night. And I just ran in to the Mediterranean right there on the beach in Barcelona.
How old were you, Robert, when you did this?
I'll tell you, it was in 1998, and I was 31. I was 31,
nice.
But I directed a movie that was at the festival. So I'm like, everyone's like, oh, and everyone clapped. Yes, good
Bravo.
for you. Good for you. And
Rob, I bet you felt so free, didn't you? You felt so free.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the more you travel, the more. And the funny thing is like going to Europe, everywhere you go, there's just fun. It's not like Hostel. You know, you're not going to get captured, and they're not going to hunt you and take you out. For the most part, it's all fun.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But that's what I don't get. I mean, we're living in an amazing time, and yet this tribalism and this divisiveness, I don't get it, man. Look what happened to you, Wakazashi. I mean, you meet a girl that you walked up to some girl on the dance floor, some beautiful Japanese girl, and you guys start dancing, and now 20 years later, you've been married, and how many kids do you have?
Just one. And at the time when I met her, I didn't even think, oh, she's Japanese. It was like, oh, there's a really hot girl over there.
Yeah.
And, you know, she looks like she's having a good time.
Right.
I want to go in with her. And that's it. You know, there was no thought about where are you from or, you know.
No. And she's like, if you can dance.
Rob, in Sydney. That was in Sydney as well.
Dude, Sydney, my God. One of the most fun years of my life I ever spent was in Sydney in 2005 when I was working on Superman Returns. It was amazing. I mean,
wow.
And that's like what people don't understand is like one of the things, like when you go to Europe, you just don't know what's going to happen to you on a daily basis. And it's usually all good. It's just.
Yeah. It's not hostile.
No, it's not.
Can I ask you both a question?
Yes, sir.
Or, just what you were saying about you're so right. You know, we've had things so good for so long. You know, things are great. Technology is great. Things are so easy, mostly. So why, or who or what is trying to divide us? Why are things becoming so divisive these days? You know, division, like it wasn't there 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. I just don't get it.
I think it's because people forgot that we're more alike than different. And, you know, if in your mind you've convinced yourself that your neighbor has different beliefs and that those beliefs are somehow harmful to you, it creates a certain level of anxiety and animosity. I mean, I remember growing up and we had neighbors where we didn't get along that well, or we had different views, but, I didn't feel anxiety because of it. It was just, we just got along, and, we just went on with our lives and we came out okay with it. But, I think that it's a very dangerous game that you're playing if every comment that someone makes is going to inflict, some sort of like genuine harm against you. And I've heard a number of philosophers say that, if someone has that kind of power over you, that they can tell you something that's going to, cause you to feel or affect your behavior or beliefs, then, you really, they've really kind of gained control over you. And that's something you want to avoid. Like, you don't, even if someone tells you the most upsetting thing in the world, you really kind of have to make a decision on your own and say, am I going to listen to what they have to say and let it change and ruin my whole day? Or am I going to take it in stride, just like any other thing I hear? And, stick with how, my own beliefs and my system of how I'm going to regulate myself, because I want to get along, and we all want everyone to get along with one another. And that's the only way it's going to happen. This is, seeing people go ahead and project the idea that, every single little comment is hurtful and painful is not a healthy way to live.
No. Well, I have a theory too. I think I had a first generation. My girlfriend at the time gave me my first generation iPhone in 2007. Yeah. And one of the things that I loved, like, I love technology. I love message boards, like AOL message boards in the 90s. I love being able to talk to people around the world about, like, warp engines and Star Trek and go onto the forums. But when we got social media, what happened is that we were able to tailor the experience of the information we received. Like, before, you would get a newspaper and you would open up a newspaper and you would read a bunch of different stuff. Like, even stuff you might not have been necessarily interested in, but you'd, like, read an op-ed piece about something you didn't know about and be like, oh, okay. What happened with social media was you could now tailor the experience of the information you received. And you could turn it into making it only stuff that you were particularly interested in. Where before, you would watch the nightly news and you would be exposed to 10 different stories that of all different types.
A much more broad point of view.
Absolutely. And now with social media, you've designed, we have now made ourselves the center of our own universe. And the other thing about social media that wasn't ever, it never existed in human experience before, is that you could take a picture of yourself and send it out in the universe, and the universe would rate it, would give you a like or whatever, and suddenly you're like, oh my God, the universe, which meaning my fellow human beings, are now, they've looked at something I've sent and they've given me feedback. Instantaneously. So what's happened is that social media has inherently put each and every individual at the center of their own universe now, where they're only getting input that they want. And so the problem with that is that it makes you believe that you are in fact the center of the universe in some way, shape, or form, some psychological, call it what you want. But what it is stopping you from doing is just experiencing things, just finding information out that might be interesting to you, because all that's been filtered out. You're only getting stuff you want to see. But even you as an individual, part of life is you might be inspired by something you never even knew you were inspired by, and it'll lead you down a path and inspire you in ways like, oh my God, I want to explore this. No one's got anything to explore anymore because they're only experiencing things that they want to experience. So it's not like when you go to Europe for the first time and you go out for a night on the town in Barcelona where everything is foreign, where like that was exciting. You had to go out into the world, and you had to have something to say. You had to be able to walk up to somebody and go, "Hi, this is my first time in Europe. Where's your favorite place in Barcelona?" And start a conversation or whatever. You had to put yourself out there. No one's doing that anymore. There's no, they're just sitting there getting this input, and they're like, I don't really want to go out. I mean, I'm like, no, man, you got to put the phone away. Why would you go to a rock Why would you go to a rock concert and hold up a phone and be looking at the band playing through your telephone? Like it's going to sound terrible anyway. Why are you not present in the own? You've paid maybe hundreds of dollars to say go see U2 doing the Joshua Tree tour, which I saw the original tour in '87, and then I went and saw it at the here in the Rose Bowl a couple of years back.
No.
I saw the original tour in Vancouver, and it was awesome. Seeing when hearing The Edge and playing the beginning of Bullet the Blue Sky, rah, 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 that just growling fucking guitar. I mean, it was fucking. They had this gigantic wall of speakers, and we were sitting in the. I mean, right behind. I mean, we were kind of far away, but I was up high. It was, and when that happened, I have never heard a guitar sound in a stadium, and the Rose Bowl's open, where we were, where I could. I mean, it felt like I was being hit. I was actually being hit by a wave of sound. I'd
and
never.
This is you too?
Yeah, it was when they went and did the Joshua Tree. They just played the whole album. I mean, they did.
Oh, yeah.
But this was like 3 or 4 years ago.
So jealous.
It was unbelievable. Now I went and saw, like I said, the original in '87. I went and saw the original tour, but this was a next level thing because they had new. And I'm sitting there going, I was literally just holding up my hands because I've never felt bass coming from these gigantic speakers where I could literally, it was rattling my teeth. I'm just like, oh my God. Like the last thing I want to do is be like holding up a let me make sure that I, like Larry Mullen, I can see him. Like, what? No, I was hearing it and feeling it. And people have forgotten how to do that. Like to actually live.
You're right, but we can also say the same thing for streaming services and video because growing up, things came on television. There was a few channels. Let's say if you grew up in the United States, maybe 4. I know we had 2, 4, 7, and there was 11, 9, and then there were public broadcasting stations of Channel 13, 21. Whoever's from New York knows these or this area. And you had to watch entire films. Like you had to wait, when the film started to the middle to the end. You couldn't fast forward. You couldn't play it on fast speed. You couldn't do anything like that. So
nope.
You had an experience that whoever made that film or program, you experienced the whole thing and you watched it. Like you had no choice but to experience it like that. So now, a video experience or a movie experience can be dramatically different if you're not in a movie theater where it's being shown in a projection. Now you can watch the film or fast forward parts you don't want to see, and not even have seen them.
Just fast forward.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I think that we have to live our lives. And when I moved to Los Angeles in 1988. It was a very different place. And it was that summer was so much fun. And I had just turned 21. And what was really interesting about Los Angeles is that when you would go to a bar, like all the guys knew, hey, we're here to meet girls. And the girls knew we're here to meet guys. That was an unspoken understanding. But there was no malevolence about it. It was just so much fun. And you understood if there was a guy expressing an interest in a girl, you were like, okay, that guy clearly, they got something going on or whatever. But you're still having a good time. There was no competition, no malevolence. It was just fun. And I was newly 21, so I could drink. And I'd go into bars, and it was a very exciting time. L.A. in 1988. The Lakers won the world championship. The city was all down. It was very exciting. And it was just, it was so much fun. And the summer of 1988 was a pivotal moment in my life because I'd never lived anywhere else but Seattle. And I moved down here by myself. I was going to USC, starting film school there. And I lived in Los Angeles. And everywhere I went, I met all kinds of people. Like I drove to bad parts of town just because I'd heard about, and I met cool people. You know, and it was the kind of thing where all you had to do was be open to it. And I didn't have a bad experience that summer. And it was all about just going out and meeting people. And I realized, you know, you can meet and talk to anybody if you approach them in the correct way. And the correct way is just be open to them. You know, walk up to people and just be interested in them. Like, hey, you know, I just moved here from Seattle. I've never been to LA. And, you know, I heard there's this great restaurant in South Central. I want to check it out. I'm like the only white person for miles. And people are like, wait a minute. You cracker white boy that you are, drove to South Central LA. And I'm like, yeah, man, you know, I read about this thing. I came here to check it out. Like, what's the best thing on the menu? And if people understand that you're genuinely interested, they will take you under their wing. They will show you their neighborhoods. They'll show you their lives. They'll open up to you. And you would be amazed at how much fun you can have. And all you have to do is look them in the eye and genuinely express interest in what they're about and ask them, tell me, where are we? What is this? Show me your world. I'm here to, and I feel like we've lost that. Like what, with social media, with phones and all this technology, it's like, you know what? We've got, you can figure out how to get everywhere now. Like before, you had to flip through a Thomas guide and figure out, I'd be like driving into these neighborhoods. I'm like, what the fuck? How do I get to where I'm going? Now you just put up your phone, you program in an address, you can drive right there. So it's now, the technology will get you where you want to go. But where you really want to go is not to a location. Where you want to go is into the essence of that place. You want to get to the core of the people, man. And no technology can get you through that door. The only way you can ever bond with people is to look them in the eye, show your enthusiasm when they can see how wide your eyes get and the smile on your face and the enthusiasm in your voice when you say, hey, man, I read about this restaurant. I've come here. What's the best thing that you have to serve? What's the greatest thing I should eat? Because that's why I'm here. I came here to see you. Tell me about this place. And we're not doing that. We're not doing that anymore. And we're not connecting with people, and this is our problem. And America, we should be the first people. Americans are great. Americans can go everywhere and be like, hey, what's up? And yet we're not doing that.
Robert, how do you think an alien visit, a legitimate alien visit, you know, they come down, you know, we see the aliens, they're here. What kind of changes do you think would happen? Because, you know, there's this whole thing like, you know, maybe if we have an alien visit, all of a sudden we'll feel like, you know, humanity is closer. What expectations or changes in humanity do you think will occur if aliens were to visit?
Oh, that's a good question. First of all, I think we'd go apeshit. I mean, because here's the thing. We unfortunately, because we think we're the center of the universe, we would expect aliens to somehow serve us. And I think that's wrong. I think if aliens came down to our planet, we should be the first people. Like, look, I understand. I saw the Twilight Zone episode To Serve Man. They're here to steal our water and to eat us, like in V. But I think that what we need to do is we need to hold the role and be like, welcome. What can we do for you? Mm-hmm. What can we show you? And I'm not saying to be naive and think like obviously aliens probably monitored our transmissions. They know we believe that whatever aliens, they're either going to, other than ET, they're going to blow up our cities, kill everyone, steal our water, and all of that. So I think what's going to happen is that we have to just take a breath and be interested, inquisitive. Look those aliens straight in the eye and say, it's amazing that you're here.
Right.
What can we do for you? Tell us what you need from us. And I think it's going to be hard.
Do you think that so let's say we've been introduced to this alien species. Do you think that if they did have an impact, let's say a positive impact, there may be negative ones, but let's say they had a positive impact, do you think that positive impact will lead to, let's say, humanity addressing some of its deficiencies?
I would hope so, because I think it would put a different perspective on all of our lives if we realize that ultimately, like, I think one of the great questions that preoccupies everybody is, what is the purpose of my life? Like, what am I supposed to do? I don't know. There's no humanity playbook, so I don't know what am I supposed to do? Well, what would be interesting is if aliens came here, they would obviously be more technologically advanced, and they would probably have gotten over those questions. But I think that would be the question that would preoccupy us the most is, what is the meaning of life? We would actually we don't have God, like we can pray to God, but there is no God that's shown up, and God's not answering us literally. Like I want to be like, bruh, God asked you a question. Can you please? And we don't get an answer. God works in mysterious ways. But if aliens arrived here, they would be a God proxy, where I think that we as humanity, first of all, it'd be our leaders, the United Nations or whatever. There would actually be an entity that we could, for the very first time in human history, ask for wisdom, and we would actually get an answer. And I think that would be like, okay, you guys how did you survive your technological infancy? Mm-hmm. I'm sure you guys had social media. What happened when suddenly conspiracy theories were the big deal, where people didn't want to get vaccinated, or they actually believe that the Democrats have a pizza parlor where they abuse children and drink blood? And what happens when people believe that? And the aliens, because they would have authority over us because they came to us, they might be able for the very first time to answer back and offer some like wise pearls of wisdom that we haven't had before. So that's what I would hope would happen. By the way, I have to say that Russell Whitfeld sent in a large super chat.
Really?
And Russell Whitfeld says, rules. So good to see her on the show. Now, I'm not saying that's a little flirty, but perhaps it could be. And by the way, Russell, that is fucking metal. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Russell Whitfield. I so appreciate it. And thank you for tuning into Midnight Metal. This is it's so kind of you to be so generous. Thank you.
Oh, and he's not done yet. He sends in another super chat and says, hey, Rob, as soon as the travel ban lifts, I'm heading to the U.S. for a few months. Are you up for whiskeys at the whiskey when I hit L.A.? Well, Russell, let me think on that for a minute. Yes! Why, yes, I am up for whiskeys at the whiskey. By the way, if we're not just going to whiskeys, we have to go to the Rainbow. We got to go to the Rainbow. That's where it happens. Russell, sir, I will go wherever and whenever you want to go. I'll take you around. We'll do L.A. upright, sir. I mean, I would just say I'm a middle-aged man with one foot in the grave, but I know my L.A. landmarks. Just saying.
I'm coming too.
Welcome. You're welcome. You're coming. However, if you're going to come to the States, I've got a Gundam. I've got some Gundam. I got some super robot die-cast things you got to bring me. Just saying. And your
Price for
your
admission.
wife's gonna have to translate some Japanese instructions I've got for a few model kits that I want to finish. Just saying. But you're welcome to come, the two of you. I'm just gonna make her work a little bit. Yeah.
Speaking of Gundam, you were right. I noticed on Netflix that a lot of the Gundam shows are on the series on there. Gundam,
They all dropped.
they are all on there. And I didn't really watch a lot of the Gundam show, but I remember it because, in the 80s, like we had great cartoons. So, this was just one of them. And I remember people getting in these suits, and I kind of described it to my mother. And I said, imagine if you could travel in a giant robot suit. And she got it right away. She was like, "Oh, that'd be nice." I was like, "Yeah, it would be really nice, wouldn't it?" So I'm glad they're showing it again.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I mean, the thing about, as you know, is it Wakazashi? Am I getting it right? Uh-oh.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, that's right. So we just your video scrambled a bit, but the thing about Gundam, what people. This is a very weird geeky thing to say. So there is two genres of Japanese robot anime. There are super robots, and there are real robots. So basically, Gundam are tanks. Gundam is like mobile suits are weapons of war where pilots are in them. And what's funny, real robots are more like the Iron Giant. And even though real robots super robots are like the Iron Giant, and they're like characters unto themselves. And they also have
great movie.
Yeah, they also have pilots and all that, but real robots are tools. They're like the Gundams are actual mobile suits that are used as weapons of war. So it's a whole different vibe. But the great thing about like the original Gundam series the original Gundam series was canceled before it finished airing. And they turned it into 3 movies, and that's now on Netflix.
Oh.
And so what's interesting about Gundam is there is an original continuity that spans many different Gundam shows, the Universal Century, that talks about this conflict between the Earth Federation and the Principality of Zeon, which is all of these space colonies that were built. And so the space colonies, kind of like in The Expanse, want their autonomy and they want their independence. Well, the Principality of Zeon is made up of different space colonies, and they're fighting against Earth. And so that conflict is part of what's called the Universal Century. Now, what happened is Gundam also has all of these alternate universes that are not part of that main continuity. And the first Gundam show that was brought to America was not until the late 90s that was done for Toonami on Cartoon Network, which was Wing Gundam, which was not part of the original Gundam continuity. And you could get Gundam in the late 70s and early 80s and 80s, but it was sporadic. So Gundam, the Gundam icon, it's funny because, as you know, Wakazashi, there are full-size Gundam statues around Japan, and it's a big deal. And the 2019 was the 40th anniversary of Gundam, and Gundam's more popular worldwide than ever. And so now that it's on Netflix. And Netflix is doing a live-action Gundam series.
Oh, really? Since when?
Yeah, that's right.
It's in production. And,
wow.
and I can't... The guy who directed Kong Skull Island, Jordan Voight Roberts?
I think so, yeah.
He's the director. And, man, I seeing the RX-78 in Ready Player One, I can't wait. I love Gundam. I'm very excited.
Do we know where they're filming it, Robert?
Rob, who's your favorite?
What's that? Which Gundam is my favorite?
Yeah, which series? Which the anime or the movies?
Yeah. I mean, I think my favorite. Gosh, that's hard to say. I think my favorite particular specific Gundam movie is probably Char's Counterattack. And Char's Counterattack, it's part of the Universal Century, but it also has the new Gundam, which is my favorite Gundam. You know, here's Char right here. He's right here. Char, he's like the villain. You know, he's the Red Comet. And I love this character.
That's cool.
I know, isn't that cool? I love this. But yeah, so Char's Counterattack, Char Esnable, he's a villain, but he's also awesome. And but Char's Counterattack is a movie, but it's part of the Universal Century. It fits in with the whole continuity. But I love that. I love that movie. But there's a lot of really great. I love Gundam Unicorn, and now there's Gundam Origin. The newest Gundam is Gundam Hathaway, which I haven't seen, but it's also part of the Universal Century. I mean, there's 79, so what? There's 42 years now of Gundam, so it's a deep.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's impossible
you
not
know
to
so much about it. That's impressive.
Yeah, and it's impossible. Like even looking at it now, and I forced my mother to watch some of it, of course. But even looking at it now and seeing how everybody kind of like goes into the suit, like it's remarkable. Like I want that. I want us to be able to do that. I think that's a really cool technology. If we ever had something like that, that would be awesome. But it also seems like they can fly around. Even without the suit sometimes. So there's a lot going on in the series, and it's fun to watch.
Well, ultimately, Gundam is really about the futility of war. And it is a very it's a very pessimistic in a way show. I mean, and it deals with, it really is, again, like a lot of Japanese science fiction. It was sort of born out of the fact that they're the only country that's been nuked twice. And Godzilla, Gojira, being brought out in the 50s, but Gundam is the same kind of thing. I mean, the first Gundam series begins with one of these giant. Actually, it lands on Sydney. It lands on Australia. This giant orbiting space platform.
No way.
Yeah, is crashed to Earth in the very beginning, and I mean, it's this conflagration. It's giant. I mean, Imagine if you took something that was as large as New York City and dropped it on Sydney, Australia.
Right.
And that explosion, it should have shifted the Earth but that's what happens at the beginning of the very first Gundam movie, is this gigantic, they're called sides, this space orbiting Babylon 5-esque space colony crashes down to Earth. And that's how it opens.
Yeah.
So it's pretty apocalyptic. By the way, Michael Elliott says, "Hey, Rob and everyone, I love those old conspiracy thrillers. The favorites being Colossus, The Forbin Project from 1970. I love that. And The Andromeda Strain. I love those. Both of those movies I own. Those are great science fiction movies. So good." Twin Flicks says, "Remember My Stepmother is an Alien?"
Yes.
It's a true story. That's what he says. I don't know how true it is. I need proof. Stubble McShave says, "I don't think our transmissions into space have influence on alien interest in us. We've been transmitting for 100 years, and the Milky Way is 100,000 light years across. I wonder how I Love Lucy would impact an alien civilization. Do they have a sense of humor?" Well, that's probably a good bet, cool. But I think beyond the humor, they would be looking at, like, trying to make sense of, obviously, clearly this is a life form on different planets. They would be so enamored of just getting a signal that the actual content of that signal would be lost on them. There's no way they would have any context at all. But I think they'd just be stoked, like, some alien civilization sent this to us. So,
right.
Fabrice. Yeah, right? Fabrice says, rotoscoping, which is an animation technique where you draw over live action footage. Rotoscoping, a scanner darkly, is the best adaptation of a Philip K. Dick novel, and Undone on Prime. both used it. Undone's a series actually that I really liked. Both used it to express a fuzzy reality. Your thoughts on these? You know what? I like A Scanner Darkly, and I liked Undone. A Scanner Darkly is really hard to watch. It gives me a headache because it's like swimming all the time. By the way,
it's very dark as well.
Yeah, and for those of you who are keeping score, we did just celebrate a couple days ago or maybe was it yesterday? The release, the 39th anniversary of the release of both Blade Runner and The Thing.
Ooh.
Which were released on the same day.
Yes, 2 classics, and they're just wonderful.
Gogol13, a.k.a. Brandon the Infinite Wolf, says, good very early morning, nice. RMB and
Hey.
Joined to get a different perspective on many things. I can't roll my R's. We are way too insignificant for aliens, ATM. Mm-hmm. That could be. Is that true? Steve Bryant sent in a Super Chat sticker. I don't know what it is, but I think he did. So thank you for that. Father Marin. That's from The Exorcist. Hey, Rob. I had to see Fast 9 last night for myself. Mm-hmm. They definitely hit a new level of ridiculousness. But before the movie, I shit you not, 10 fucking trailers. And this was at an AMC Dolby Theater. Also, they moved Dune back 3 weeks to October 22nd.
Right.
It's true. I know. What a bummer.
Dune.
It's going to be premiering at is it premiering at Venice?
Yes.
Is that what they said?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm assuming they're very excited for it.
I can't wait. I'm doing a new podcast with I'm doing Marilyn Vance, one of the preeminent costume designers in Hollywood. She has me doing a new podcast with her, and we're going to be interviewing the costume designers of Dune in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
So, yeah, that'll be fun.
Wow, that is awesome, Robert. I can't wait to hear about that. That's incredible. That's incredible. I
can't wait.
Scoop.
I can't wait. It's going to be good.
Now you did a recording just the other day, right?
Yeah,
Robert?
yesterday. With Daniel Oliveri, the costume designer who worked on everything from Ford v Ferrari. He did Logan with James Mangold. He did the drag movie Flawless with Robert De Niro and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Worked with Joel Silver. It was an Joel Schumacher and Joel Silver. But that wasn't the same thing. It was an amazing conversation, which will be on. It'll go up in the next 2 days. So,
yeah, I think they said the 28th or something like that. Or I can't wait to hear it. I'm definitely going to check that out. I mean, that must have been quite a fun interview, and just even understanding their approach. When you start on a production of that scale, which is huge. That
was amazing. It was so much fun.
Yeah,
I think. 200 Watt Studio says this is off topic. But I got The Hot Spot, which is the Dennis Hopper directed film that stars Don Johnson and, of course, a young Jennifer Connelly, who actually was topless before she got a breast reduction. Yeah. He says, wow, Rob, you were right. Jennifer Connelly, mercy. Thank you for the recommendation. So for those of you who aren't up on this. So The Hot Spot was a film, modern noir, directed by Dennis Hopper. Miles Davis and John Lee Hooker did the score for the movie, so it's amazing. And in the film, Jennifer Connelly, a young Jennifer Connelly, plays a character, and she actually has a topless scene. And what was so interesting to me about this movie was I saw it at the Directors Guild the first time, and it was a pretty packed house, but it was a pretty equally men and women in the audience. And the scene where Jennifer Connelly's breasts were revealed, her breasts were so perfect, so ample, that everyone in the theater, when they saw her bare breasts, they all went, the entire audience, men, women. I've never sat in a theater in my life where people and it wasn't because they were shocked by the nudity. They were just in awe of how perfect her breasts were.
It sounds wonderful, Robert.
Oh, it was. Let me tell you. Of course, I had heard that she had later had a breast reduction, which makes sense. I mean, I understand. But for that brief moment in time, I think that everybody in the audience at the Directors Guild, I want to say in 1990, were privy to seeing the two greatest breasts in perhaps all of human history. I'm just,
Wow. She's
I
a
was
stunner
there.
without even showing anything, like that, including everything else. I mean, she's just so beautiful. It must have been quite a moment
It was.
for you.
Let me tell you, I mean, I went with a woman, a much older woman who I work with, and she brought me there, and even she, like, nudged me with her elbow, going, I'll bet you like that, don't you? And I'm like, and I turned to her and I said, who doesn't? And she's actually, she's a gay woman, and she turned to me and she said, I certainly do. And I'm like, oh boy, she was great. I loved her. Ivana.
I think it's really interesting, the placement of nude scenes in a sense, for film, especially during that time period where I think, Robert, you had not a podcast, but you had a stream where you talked about the importance of love scenes, or the importance of love in a movie in general. Sometimes those scenes can be very special, and I know a lot of people kind of looking at it, in a different way, but a lot of times, that's one of the elements of a film that makes it worth watching. I mean, obviously, that's not the most important thing, but it is an important element. And when it's not in a film, or it lacks, some kind of love, a feeling in it, like it shows, like, the film, they don't turn out as great,
I agree. I mean, by the way, Paul in Long Beach says, I keep begging anyone to do a Johnny Sacco and Giant Robot remake. Make it so, Rob. I would love to see that, But again, like you just said, I really do believe that the only people that should take on franchise properties are people that love them. Because, and of course, you have to be a talented filmmaker, but you got to love something. Otherwise, right? I mean, right, Wakazashi? I mean, if you don't love something, why do it?
Yeah, and growing up,
exactly.
I'm sure both of you have experienced this. Whenever you would see practically any film, there was always some sort of romance in it, and perhaps it was not a consummated romance, but it was hinted at, or there was some sort of element of love or romance in a film, and sometimes, like, even in films you would not expect to see that in. So I think it's a very interesting notion of looking at films nowadays where it's just completely absent, like, or if it is put in there, it's a very forced kind of experience that's just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Where has it gone? What's happened to eroticism, titillation, excitement?
I don't know. I mean, I think, again, one of the byproducts of social media is at the end of a click, you can watch the most hardcore pornography that you want to see, tailored to you, and just see that it's so mechanical. And pornography is not erotic. Pornography is pornography.
No, not at all.
And I can love porn as much as the next guy, but I was talking with somebody today about Wong Kar-wai, the director Wong Kar-wai, in a movie like In the Mood for Love.
Oh yeah,
and
so good.
When two fingers touch, these two married people, when they're clearly in love with one another, they can't, and they pass in the hall, and just one brief touch of fingers. That's what eroticism is, because the funny thing about sex is it's the end of yearning. It's the consummation of all this, and it's great, and it's explosive and all that, but it's consummation, and the idea of yearning for somebody, thinking about somebody, making them a part of your psyche, and wanting them. That's what's erotic. I mean, and
anticipation.
And all of that, and the funny thing is, if it works between two people, it never gets old. you have that give and take and all that, and it becomes something that can be all-consuming, or the glue in a relationship or whatever. But eroticism is the problem with me is once you delve into the world, when you go all in and you're just watching the actual mechanics of. My problem is so much of sexuality is in your head. It's you're giving it meaning. You're imbuing the act with meaning. Otherwise, it's just a mechanical act. But bring your imagination into it. That's where the eroticism takes place. And you in order to have real eroticism, you have to have imagination, and you have to have creativity, and you have to have lust, and you have to have desire, all kind of rolled into one.
Yeah, and it's I still marvel at the vision of either whoever writes the screenplay or the director or whoever is responsible for putting it all together for us in sort of a package that seems very continuous and timelines, I guess, where obviously there were many stops along the way to create it, but it doesn't feel that way as you're watching it. So
right.
It feels like a miracle. It feels like how on earth did they do this? And I'm really curious, just thinking about the mechanics of putting it all together. Obviously after you film these scenes and they're very disjointed during the filming process, but then, like you as an editor, Robert, would put it together so that it runs together smoothly. Have you had a lot of experience editing scenes like that, Robert?
Well, according to Fleshbot, I edited the most suspenseful lesbian sex scene ever.
Really?
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I should find that. I'll put it in the live chat. This is true.
Oh my God, this is so good.
Please do.
So hang on, let me see. This is actually very funny. This is something I don't usually talk about, but it's very funny. Let me see.
It wasn't with William Shatner, was it?
No, but that would have been great. Here it is. I found it. So this is fantastic. So I'm gonna I can't. That's hardcore. I can't put that on here. But I'm going to do a frame grab on this. You're gonna see this. So for those of you who don't know, I worked on what we would call a Skinamax show, called Femme Fatales, and it was a show where we had sex scenes in it. And so one of the episodes that I directed was an episode called Help Me Rhonda, which was a sequel to, let's see, there's an ad in here. You can't, okay, there we go. So here it is. Femme Fatales wins the most suspenseful lesbian sex scene ever award. Now, so this was published July 11th, 2011. What's the deal, Cinemax? Why did you have to make such a dramatic soundtrack for this softcore lesbian sex scene? All we want to see is some nipple sucking, but you're making us incredibly anxious, and this is starting to get Pavlovian. The minute we get a panic attack from watching two ladies make out, we're suing. Last week, there was that whole penis shooting incident, and we're not saying that the guy didn't deserve it, or that other facets of the show weren't incredibly hot, but this is the way Femme Fatales is going to proceed. Let's see, is there any, I don't know what they, I just put something that's somebody's going to get me. That's terrible. Anyway, don't look at that. I just showed some hardcore pornography in this show, which I'm going to have to cut out. Anyway, no one knows, right? Don't take a frame grab of that. I got to cut that out. Oops. But yeah, so, I did. So I directed this scene, and it was shot outside, and it was shot outside. I can't believe I just showed that. I just skipped by an ad in this Fleshbot ad, but anyway. So yes, so I directed this. Terrible. I did in fact direct this lesbian sex scene. And we shot it at Cecil B. DeMille's hunting lodge. He directed like 10 Commandments. And I thought it would be really interesting that these two characters are going to get rid of, they've killed the husband of one of them, so these two characters could be together. And it was, yeah. and it was fun. So I shot it outside, and we added this Joe Kramer who scored the scene. It was very suspenseful, and so it's a suspenseful scene.
Was it erotic or not really? Just very.
Not shooting erotic scenes is not erotic at all. And by the way, the two actresses I work with, they hated each other. I didn't know that they knew each other from before, and they didn't like each other, so it was very uncomfortable. It was very uncomfortable.
Wow,
And since you're asking, it's very interesting. Like, the funny thing about working on one of these shows, like a Cinemax show like Femme Fatales, is you want to make the sex scenes interesting. And yet what they really want is they just want depictions of sexuality that 14-year-old boys understand. So, like I was trying to do I wanted to do some stuff that was a little bit more, let's call it a little bit more transgressive. And there's no way. There's no way, especially if you're not dealing with actors who work in porn. You can't. These are all legit actors that are not working in the pornography world. They're all working in the straight world. And yet you're still trying to do these sex scenes, and it was really hard. It was really weird.
But
it was very uncomfortable.
Time, Robert, and I don't know all the details, but at that time, let's say you're an actor and you sign a contract. In the contract, in regards to what an actor can do or is willing to do, was that something back then? Like, was that a thing then, or is it more of a thing now?
No, it was a thing then too. I mean, there was a nudity waiver, and you had to be like the producers of the show would tell me that I was to call my actors that were going to participate in these scenes and talk to them at length about what I wanted and what I expected and what was going to happen. And I would have these conversations, so they knew what they were in for. But what I was trying to do was basically the thing about these late night Skinemax shows, and anyone who watches them knows that the sex is very fake looking. It's not real. And like I had this, I'll tell you a funny story. So the first scene that I was going to direct, because I'd never directed any kind of eroticism before, and
Robert, your first time.
I know, right? So I had this whole idea that this female character, there would be a guy like on the bed, like standing up with his legs spread, and our female character would come up and from behind him and caress his legs and come up from behind him and pleasure him from behind and give him a little rim job or whatever on her way up above and coming up over his shoulders and really dominating him and pushing him on the ground and, just doing something kind of interesting. Right. And I'm explaining this. I'm explaining this to the actress, and she's like, "You realize, no, I'm not going to do any of this." and it was then I'm it was funny because I had this whole way I wanted to shoot it, and I'm like, yeah, but I want to show something kind of interesting, and she's like, I'm not going to do that. And then I realized, okay, I guess it's back to just like normal sex. And that's fine.
But in a lot of those in these types of productions, Robert, and correct me if I'm wrong, seems like there's a lot of sort of I guess you would call it shadows. There's a lot of shadows in a lot of these productions, and there's a lot of implied movements, like for example, like a woman sort of like laying backwards, and that might be all you get, or a guy kind of like maybe walking into a room and taking off her shoe, like that might be it, like it may not go farther than something like that. So there's a lot of implied parts to these skin films, which I mean, I've watched a ton of them. Like that's all you had for many of us. That was all you had access to, especially in the 80s. You turn on Showtime, the movie channel, Cinemax, and they'd be on after maybe 8 o'clock, and you'd watch them. Like this is all you had. So you looked forward to this, but there was a lot of implied sexual positions. Some of them didn't even enact an actual position, but there was a sexual nature to them.
Yeah. No, it's so weird because, they wanted these shows to be titillating, but the actual sex was all fake. And it was bizarre because you can tell it's fake. But if you're like 14 years old and you want to see girls with boobs or something, and by the way, they would time it. They would say like, okay, every like 7 minutes, you have to have a sex scene that lasts 90 seconds. We need to see 90 seconds of bare breasts. and like I edited my own shows. So I have to say that the second season premiere, which was an episode called The Hot House, it was the very first time that I was called that I had to tone down one of my sex scenes.
Robert.
I know. And they actually said you can't do that. And then I also directed the sex scene in the first season that everyone said was the most rapey sex scene of the series. And I was like, I took great offense to that because first of all, it's beautifully shot. Mm-hmm. But the whole point is that the character is a policewoman who's bringing in this guy. She's manipulating this guy and allowing him to do what he wants to her, but at the same time, she's getting off on it. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that I was trying to bring a psychological element to it, and people were like, that scene's so rapey. I'm like, really? Like, I thought it had a little bit more nuance than that, but I guess if you want to look at it that one way. But it was very weird. So I directed 5 episodes of Femme Fatales, and the sex scenes were always very, very uncomfortable to direct.
Wow. Yeah,
because
that's...
you couldn't do what you really wanted, and it was all like this weird fake 14-year-old boy version of sex, so it was bizarre. It was weird.
Well, that's...
14 again.
I know.
That's a good point. And there were a lot of 14-year-old girls, like their fantasies are not too dissimilar to what, you would see in that, and probably saw a little bit more than I should have with films like that, but that's okay. Like, I think it was a great art form, and, I think that it definitely played an important role in a lot of our lives.
Oh, yeah.
So this is another thing that I think is interesting. I don't think there's anybody out there who's going to be saying things like, well, that porn film changed. No. Like, these films were, it was a craft because, there was some effort put into it to make it have a certain image and a certain sensuality to it. And if anything, the films were very sensual. So, as far as I'm concerned, they've achieved what they were supposed to achieve, whether, sex was happening in them or not. Like, you don't have to have, that the consummation in a film to reach a certain level of sensuality. And, as far as I'm concerned, but.
No, I agree. And by the way, we're getting in a bunch of chats. Black Philip Alvarez says, hello, R&B. Long time since I tipped, and looking very thanks for showing up to my streams.
It's my pleasure, Black Philip.
There you go. And Fabrice says, R&B, check out Naked Director on Netflix, based on a semi-biographical novel telling the evolution of the JP porn industry. Very interesting and enlightening. I'll watch that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Japanese porn industry. Yeah.
The JP, I would love that. Naked Director, I'm a big fan, obviously, of Japanese girls, so what's wrong with Japanese porn? I have a lot of the pinky violence movies that were made in the 70s, too, which is all good. But yeah, I'll watch that. Naked, I've heard, you're not the first person to tell me Naked Director is really good, so I'll check that out. Mukbang Reviews, our friend.
It's pretty funny, too.
I've heard it's good. Do you watch it? Yeah?
Yes. Yeah, season 1. It's quite funny.
Oh.
I'll definitely watch that. Mukbang Reviews. I haven't seen you in it forever, man. Good to see you again. Is Nightmare on Elm Street 2 still the most LGBT gay horror film ever? It probably is, to be honest. I didn't get it at the time, but I think the whole series is LGBT friendly, and I'm here for it. Happy Pride Month. Well, Mukbang Reviews, yes. I mean, people don't know this, but Jack Shoulder, who directed Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, is gay himself. And I think that as Nightmare 2 has become a celebrated gay, iconic gay film, and I actually think it's actually quite a good film. It's very, very interesting. But yes, there's a documentary about it. There's a lot of now it's being reappraised, and there's a lot of online articles about it. But definitely check those out because, yes, you're absolutely right about that. It is definitely considered to be an LGBTQ milestone. Twin Flick says, Rob, will you sign my Femme Fatales DVD copy? Yes, I will. Are you kidding me? I was looking for mine. Like, here, wait. Here, hang on. I look. I see. Hang on. This is my DVD copy of Femme Fatales. And here is, this is what I worked on. And actually, I'll go full frame on this. So this is it only ran 2 seasons, but here it is. And as a matter of fact, Libra, I directed this episode right there. But this was, I got to tell you, working on the show was, I wonder if there's anything in here that I can show that's cool without, no, there's no booklet. But it was a lot of fun working on the show, I will say. It's not going to be ever considered high art. And we shot every episode in 3 days, which was insane. But it was certainly fun to work on. So there you go. But I will sign your DVD. And Mukbang Reviews comes back and says, I couldn't make a message transmit through the tip. So is Lost Boys also is Lost Boys also a vampire film like Interview LGBT? I loved it. I love those films. Happy Pride Month. Interesting. Like, what do you guys think? I don't necessarily, I think there's a lot of homoeroticism in the vampire genre, but Interview with a Vampire, obviously Anne Rice is the queen of LGBTQ vampire eroticism, and Louis' relationship with Lestat. Once you're a vampire, I think your gender no longer matters to you. It's just people. But certainly I think that Interview with a Vampire is kind of an LGBT masterpiece in a way, if you want to look at it that way. I never thought of the Lost Boys that way, but you can definitely find the homoeroticism in it, from the sax player at the beginning, playing I Still Believe, to the relationship that Michael has with Kiefer Sutherland. Yeah, and of course Joel Schumacher, who directed it. I mean, yeah, I would say Lost Boys is pretty flaming, if you want to look at it that way. You can. But you see what you want to see. I think Interview with the Vampire is much more sensual than the Lost Boys. Oh yeah,
and I think that, and I can't say that this is true in the book, but like Lestat has completely taken over Louis and anyone else who lives with him. So he has complete control over them, mind, body, spirit, everything. Like, so I wouldn't be surprised if they were in the same bed, like he's Louis the only person he can trust now. So, Louis has to serve a function, and Louis, because of his ignorance, let's say in the first 50 years of his life as a vampire, is, as far as I'm concerned, is not aware that he's being taken advantage of. And I think it's not until later on that he realizes that he's got to get out of the situation. But for that amount of time, like, he's really just, used. And I don't think he's complaining about being used. I think his life turned out a lot better than what it might have turned out had he not become a vampire. Right. No, I agree. Who wouldn't want to have Tom Cruise showing them the way? It's funny. I had a friend of mine who didn't like Vampire Lestat's one of my favorite books I've ever read. But in Interview with the Vampire, a friend of mine used to tell me how much he hated it. I'm like, why do you hate it? And he'd be like, look, dude, you know what that book is? He's like, that book, the entire book is one dude going, I don't want to be a vampire. And he was like that. Who doesn't want to be a vampire?
The only person who doesn't want to be a vampire is fucking Louis in Interview with the Vampire. Like, everybody wants to be a vampire. And yet Louis like, and that's why I didn't like it. And I was like, you've got a point. But I still enjoyed, I love the hell out of that. And I think the movie's really good too.
Yeah, the movie was beautifully done. And one other thing I was going to say is I love how Brad Pitt did play. He felt innocent. Like, he obviously is a vampire, you're not innocent, but he had this certain sexual vulnerability that was just delicious. Like, you wanted to eat it up with a spoon. And, you could see his agony and him aching, and you just wanted to, like, just that character was just infectious. I couldn't get enough of it. Even now, what is it, over 20 years later, it still is an incredibly intense performance of Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise in that. And, Tom Cruise really was the master as far as I'm concerned. Of course, the character has a different fate, but I felt like he really controlled and led the film at a level that might have been unreachable with another actor. And Antonio Banderas added a certain element of danger to it. For example, his swarthy sexual good looks mirrored, what you might imagine a vampire might be like.
Yeah.
If you could translate the beauty and the luring ability that a vampire has, Antonio Banderas had that. And I also think that in Queen of the Damned, Aaliyah had that.
Yep.
She managed to create, a menacing figure, but you had no choice, but you couldn't take your eyes off of her. She just was so alluring and drew you in. And if there was ever a vampire, she was it. She captured that moment from the book. That's very hard to recreate on screen, as far as I'm concerned.
They announced this week again that there's now going to be a series, an Interview with a Vampire series that they've been trying to do for years. And I really hope one of the great tragedies of horror cinema is that they didn't do the Vampire Lestat. I loved that book, and they went from Interview, and then they did Queen of the Damned, and I'm like,
it's a good book.
I was like, how do you not? Tom Cruise, instead he did not Rockstar, he did a Rock of Ages, where he's playing a rock star. I'm like, how do you not make the Vampire Lestat? I'm like, how does that happen? Like, I don't, like, I've read all of the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles. Lestat goes to Atlantis. It gets a little crazy. But the Vampire Lestat, they should have made those three movies as big budget.
Yes.
Stuart Townsend wasn't a bad Lestat, in Queen of the Damned, but still it's not what it should be. It's a low budget knockoff. But if Tom Cruise, I think Tom Cruise could have done.
Do you remember?
What's that?
Sorry, when Tom Cruise was cast for it originally, there was quite a bit of controversy at the time. Do you remember that?
People hated it. They hated he was cast.
Yeah,
Everyone's
it
like,
was a huge reaction. Yeah.
Oh, it should be like Sting should play him. People hated Tom Cruise. and you know what's really funny is that when it came out, people were like, yeah, he's pretty good. All the people that. But now you go back and look at it.
He was really good. He was really good.
He's really good. He gave it his all. But at the time, people just hated they cast him because they wanted.
Yeah, they went crazy.
Yeah, they wanted Bowie or Sting. I get it. They wanted to get a real, because everyone's like, he's got to be like the thin white Duke and all that. I get it. But once Bowie was in The Hunger, you can't have Bowie come play the Vampire Lestat. It was just not going to work.
No, that's right.
But, it was... I thought his performance was actually very, very good. The problem is, he was
really good.
He was really good, but what it needed was... Tom Cruise is not exactly, he doesn't exude sex appeal. He's not known for his love scenes. And I think the whole thing with Lestat is he'll seduce anybody. Man, woman, he doesn't care. He'll seduce anybody to drink their blood.
Right, and as well as the Banderas character, whose name I can't remember now.
Armand.
You could tell that Armand and, would just do whatever he has to do.
Yeah.
To bring things in his favor, and he has, and he's fine with it. You couldn't say no to him. That's the general feeling, I think. But
yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Mukbang Reviews, I haven't seen him in a long time. It's so great to have you here. Says, my girlfriend in college forced me to watch Bram Stoker's Dracula many times.
Yes.
It was great, but she might have been sending signals. Laugh out loud. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is that Coppola's version, I guess, which I thought was very hit and miss, but it's a beautiful film to look at, certainly. Mukbang goes on to say, it's 6 a.m. Eastern time. I can't believe I'm awake. 2 bottles of Merlot and a case of Guinness make you super chat RMB.
Wow.
Laugh out loud. I love your guests. Thank you. Well, thank you, Mukbang. I appreciate that. He goes on to say, the Vampire Lestat was the correct book to remake. I love her, Anne Rice, and she wrote some wonderful and terrible books after that. Yeah, she was very the witches. She did the Mayfair Witches, and then she did The Mummy, and she did her take on the great Universal monsters. But yeah, she was very hit and miss. Mm-hmm. Very hit and miss. But man, those first 3 books, Interview with the Vampire, Vampire Lestat, and Queen of the Damned, love them. Love them. Go adapt those. So, well, listen, kids. I have to get up early tomorrow to do our Zoom call. Our members' Zoom call.
What time is that call at?
It's at noon.
Okay.
Noon. So it'll be it's at noon. But I've been working on Tango Shalom. I had to deliver to get all this material to go to Cannes. So I've been working my ass off. So I think I'm going to bring this show to a close. We've been going for 3 hours. Can you believe 3 hours?
Well, it's that good, Robert. It's just that good.
You know what? That's what she said. Ladies. No, I appreciate that. But look, Wakazashi, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank my co-host for Friday nights. We will get you the actual artwork you've sent me metal pictures that we will be using. And of course, this show, this was a show that I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if people would watch, but these weekend shows are a lot of fun. Are you guys having fun?
Oh,
this show is fantastic, Rob. We all look forward to it every week. We look forward to it.
Yeah.
Well, I love that we went from Argentina to Japan.
Yes.
Tonight.
Yeah.
Which is
it's fucking metal.
It is fucking metal.
Absolutely.
Look. This is kind of different, but thanks to Jonathan Butcher in San Francisco. Yeah, brah, hang loose. But fucking metal, yeah. Actually, if you turn it like this and cover up the thumb, there it's metal. But yeah, so, by the way, next to all my Japanese...
Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh my God, it was great to see you again. And give your wife all my love. You know what I'm saying. You know what to do. And
arigatou gozaimasu.
Yes, congratulations on that. Well done, sir. And thank you for being here. This was great to have you. Tomorrow night we will be back with Dave Parker, the other co-host of the show. Yes. And then tomorrow, my God, I have so much to do tomorrow. We're doing a Zoom call for all the members, and then I have to do an interview, and then I'm doing a Robservations, and then Midnight Metal. Working here for you guys, all of you in the Post-Geek Singularity. Let me ask the two of you. First of all, Wakazashi, do you have a social media presence? Do you want people to find you, or are you just going to hide out in Japan and not tell anyone where you are?
I'm just hanging out in Japan. I'm going to slowly build a social media presence from now.
Nice.
But you've inspired me, Rob, and you too. So thank you very much.
That's all you have. And what about you? Where can people find you on social media? Can they find you?
Yes, you can, not on necessarily social media, but you can contact me at rimo@freshmusicfreaks.com. And as you already know, Robert, and some of you already know, I do write articles for Fresh Music Freaks. So you can check out some of my articles on EDM artists on that website.
Well, that's fantastic. You got to get us an EDM artist to come on this show.
Oh, wow.
We've had, somebody needs to come on a Friday night, like CK Smile from Colosseum came on a couple weeks ago. We need more music people.
Okay.
because I love EDM music. So hey, I'd love to have that. That would be amazing. By the way, no pressure. No pressure. I just think it'd be
I'll
kind
see
of
what
fun.
I can do, Robert. I'll see what I can do.
See what you can do. And I want to thank my moderating staff. Though Richard, of course, is here, which is great. Bunyan Snipe is here from the UK.
Bunyan.
I don't know. I think those two are the only people here because they're the only people that are up.
Gilmore?
I don't. Simon, are the Gilmore boys here?
He was here earlier, I think.
Yeah, they could, but they might have gone to bed.
Yeah.
But the Gilmore boys were here. I want to thank everybody for supporting this channel and this show via super chats and tips. Thank you so much. And by the way, if you want to send a letter to the show, you want me to read a letter, if you have a love letter you want to write to, keep it respectful so I can read it aloud, or you want to write a love letter to me, I have no problem. You can do that too. Or Wakazashi, if you want to write him a love letter and talk about how romantic the meet cute he had with his wife was, hey, I will happily read that letter as well. All you have to do is go to the Burnettwork.net website. You can send us letters. It's free of charge. We will read them aloud on the show. We will comment, and but just keep it respectful. You know, I'm not gonna. If you're not going to be respectful to, I'm not going to read your letter. And no, you can't have her phone number, her address, or email. No, you don't get any of that. So don't even ask. I know what you're up to. Don't think I don't. Shenanigans is your middle name. I get it, but I'm not going to give you her name. But you can write her a letter and I'll read it to her.
Nice word.
There you go. I know, right? So that's it. And of course, I want to thank Wakazashi all the way from Japan. Thank you for being here. So I will dismiss you first. Thank you, sir, for coming on the show. And it's good to see you again. And we'll see you again in the future.
Thank you so much.
And, wow, look, he's been trained to bow. I love that. His wife must love that.
Aww.
And so, it comes down to us. I think a 3-hour show is respectable.
I think that's a very long time, and we have lasting power, so, you know.
It's like, I would dare say, tantric. Oh, well, maybe I should go listen to Sting, the one of his solo albums again, and dream of being showing Trudy Schuyler what's up, but no, maybe not. I don't want to go off into the weeds there, but yes, that's a good thing. But I want to thank you for being the new co-host of this show. It's great to have you. You're a very valued member of this community, and I feel honored that you're a part of this now. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, Robert, to be here with you.
We're going to add you. We're going to get artwork done and make you a part of the show. I mean, you're a moderator. You're a great find, a great cornerstone of the Post-Geek Singularity community. I would be a lesser man if I didn't know you. So thank you so much for being here. It's good to have you. And how much fun was this? This was way more fun. I was like, are people going to want to talk about UFOs? And suddenly I thought, I mean, we had a great conversation, I thought.
It was amazing. And I think that, you know, I guess essentially hearing the other guest's perspective was enlightening and fun and very liberating, Robert, very liberating.
I love that. I mean, that's, you know, I always say, and I mean this, you know, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. I honestly believe that. Yes. I mean, that is my guiding principle in life, is that every person you meet has something to tell you that you don't know. Mm-hmm. I think some of the time you have to ask. You know, you have to ask people, tell me, like Thomas Dolby, tell me about your childhood before the song Hyperactive. Dun, 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 dun. I mean, I believe that. I think you really need to ask people, and they'll tell you. Get them to tell you a story. Yes. They don't even know. Some of those people might not even know they have a story to tell, but they do. They just have never been asked before. Mm-hmm. So... but on that note, would you like to give any final thoughts about aliens, sexuality, the vampire Lestat, Japan, Argentina, Star Trek, the original series, anything at all?
Gee, about the only thing I was going to say is that I watched a documentary, and I know you remember the Tribeca Film Festival thing just wrapped up. I watched a documentary on Rick James, and it was really, really good. I had no idea that he had, I mean, I knew he was an incredible talent, But this documentary really changed my opinion about him. Just
Wow.
even his life, he was incredible. He played with so many bands in the 60s and 70s, and he just was a remarkable musician. Even unfortunately, he had that issue with the law and everything. Even that, hearing his explanation for what happened, I really kind of shifted my frame of mind about him, and I think it's worth checking out. The the name of the documentary, after just read it, because it's the name of it is so different, and I hope I can find it in front of me. It's something like it's called Bitchin'. The sound.
Of course it is.
Of course it is, right? Bitchin', and it's bitchin' with like CHIN. The sound and fury of Rick James, and it's just a remarkable documentary. It's worth checking out. The other thing I was going to say is you mentioned Settlers this week.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for it. Yeah.
Well, I saw Settlers, Robert.
You did? How did you see Settlers?
Because it was at the Tribeca Film Festival.
And?
What I am going to say about it is that it has some very interesting elements that I'm not accustomed to seeing in a sci-fi film. And so I had to kind of wrap my head around that, because as I was watching the events unfold in the film, I said, wait a minute, if this happens, isn't that kind of uncomfortable? Or isn't that a little, maybe not what should be happening? And that's exactly what it was about. But there's also a very interesting twist at the end. And I'm hoping that they make another film, because I kind of want to find out more.
Wow. Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know anything about it at all till I watched the trailer this week.
Right.
And I Sophia Boutella is in it, or is it Sophia? Not Sophia.
Yes, it's Boutella. I don't know the
Boutella.
first name.
Yeah, but I was watching. I'm like, this is interesting. Is it supposed to be set on Mars?
It is, yes, and
okay.
I'm not gonna do like a full spoiler thing.
Yeah. I don't want to know.
But yes, it's about Mars, settlers on Mars, and that's all I'm going to say about it. And I'm going to say, if you want a new experience, something fun, exciting, thrilling, and just kind of different. This is the movie for you, and you're going to want more, Robert. You're going to want.
I always want more.
This is from a sci-fi point of view.
Yeah.
If you enjoy sci-fi, you're going to want more. And I was not expecting that.
That's good.
I didn't feel cheated. Like sometimes when something ends and you don't know what the story is, you feel cheated. Not at all on this one.
Well, it's like when Kirsten Dunst, when she first drank blood in the movie Interview with the Vampire, she sits up and goes, I want more. I love that. So I relate. I relate to that exactly. Well, go ahead.
No. I think was there one other thing I was going to tell you? There's just one more, and this is it. I promise.
That's okay. You can say whatever you want.
Another film that I saw was called King of the Cyborgs, and the reason why I felt I should mention this film is because the film is actually about a doctor who works with patients who are paralyzed, and he inserts his work early on in the 80s was that he would insert electrodes into the brains of patients in order to help them to gain some of their mobility back. And the film starts off, it is like a documentary, but it starts off with it sounds like a 1960s or 50s PSA movie for children about,
wow.
This is your brain. And it's like it's got a kooky sound. It's got, 1950 sci-fi effects. And then it gets very serious. Stephen Hawking's in it. And Stephen Hawking talks about how, he would only use this type of technology if it were perfected, and
wow.
There are other people. And so it was just like such an interesting foray, because it started off kind of like it hooks you, but for the wrong reason. And then you're like, this is kind of serious. Like the serious nature of the film, it was a brilliant documentary. It's called King of the Cyborgs.
Wow. I'll see that.
Yes. And that is all.
Well, that is fantastic. And on that note, I thank everybody, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, for all of you across the 28 known galaxies. I would like to say thank you for supporting the channel. I've said all I used to say. I thank the moderators. I said every person you need to know tells a story. Whatever. You know what I say every time. And again, you make the show. This was fantastic. I can't wait to do this again with you. And then tomorrow, of course, Dave Parker will come on. And this is a fun show. You know, people keep saying I should keep the Midnighter going. It's just tough burning the candle at both ends. But this show I really am enjoying. I mean, we always have so much fun. We're only going to have more fun. And I'm going to add, I will upgrade the software. I don't do stream elements. Not that I object to it. I should. So I can bring more people on. I could only imagine what this would be if we would never end. It would be a 10-hour stream. It'd be like one of Gary's. It would be like Friday Night Tights on Nerdrotics channel. It'd be endless.
Or Doomcock's Friday night event as well. Yes.
Yeah. It would be incredible. Which, by the way, wouldn't be so bad.
No.
I wouldn't mind that. So thank you for being here. I will say to everyone, wow, Midnight Metal episode 26. My God, 26. I would say goodbye to all of you. You know, and as I always say, I guess for all of you in Europe, have a better day. And I'll see you on this channel if you're a member. We're going to have a member call at noon, one of our Zoom calls. And then, of course, I'll be doing Robservations later this afternoon. Oh, my God. Does it ever end? No, it doesn't. And we wouldn't want it to. So have a good night, everyone. And you too. And on that note...